So good
All
morning,
right.
everyone. Shall I start, Daniela? Or maybe Francesco wants to introduce us? I don't know.
Yes, just a few words to welcome everybody. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Summer Training School of Into Me, edition 2023. Welcome. Let's start. We are going to spend together 1 week with a lot of interesting presentations and guests. And so to open officially, let's say, to launch officially our summer training school, I will now give the floor to Professors Mario Savino and Daniela Vitiello for the opening address.
Many thanks, Francesco. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mario Savino, the coordinator of the Giamone Center of Excellence, which organizes this summer training school. I have the privilege to work with a fantastic team of young and promising scholars, Francesco, Daniela, and many others who will accompany you during this week. And we also had the privilege to involve many other colleagues from all over Europe who will help us to deliver important contents and knowledge to all of you. This summer training school, as you know, is devoted to a very key topic. It's migration and mobility in the digital age. This is a third edition. This is the fruit of a series of activities and the program that we have with the Giamone Center of Excellence that I mentioned. Let me just spend a few words about this center and the network that it's related to it. Now, this network, this Giamone Center is a center that was established 3 years ago. We are at the end of the first 3-year period. Hopefully, it will be there will be another term of 3 years in the next few years. So this would allow us to give continuity to a series of research and teaching activities that we launched in 2020. The summer training school is a key activity of this Center of Excellence. It is closely related to a master's degree that we established 2 years ago at Tuscia University. It is a master's degree in security and human rights, which is attended by many participants to this summer training school. The Giamone Center of Excellence is also related to a broader network, which has an Italian name, Accademia di Diritto e Migrazioni, translated as Academy of Law and Migration. The acronym is still in Italian, it's ADIM. It was created in 2018 as a result of a project that was founded by the Italian Ministry of Education and Research as a consequence of the good results that we had on the publication side, let's say. This quite broad network has 500 members, including non-Italian scholars, and mostly are lawyers with a legal background, but this network is increasingly oriented to multidisciplinarity, and therefore it also involves sociologists, political scientists, economists, etc. And this quite broad network serves as a platform for exploring, analyzing, researching on new issues and developing new avenues of collaboration with academic institutions and individual scholars all over Europe. The idea behind these networks is to not only to connect people, but also to adopt a very forward-looking approach. We want to deal with important issues which are increasingly relevant, possibly underexplored in scientific terms. And this is a very good example this year. We are dealing with an issue, the application of technology to migration, which is key to what will happen in the next decades. We all know that the level of regulation in the migration field is very high, and the attention, the political attention to this topic is also significant in these decades, in these years. We know that technology is increasingly applied to many aspects of migration control and migration planning. So the idea is to offer you all the tools, or the essential, let's say, tools. We cannot do miracles in 1 week, but the idea is to offer you the essential tools to understand what is going on. What are the technical issues and the legal implications arising from the application of technology to the various aspects of migration management. I think this is also a very important chance you have to interact with people from other countries on issues which are by definition non-national, transnational, global. This is a unique opportunity. We are very glad and proud that we can offer you such a variety of backgrounds in a single room, either in presence or at distance, but still you will work together for 1 week. There are, I don't know how many countries involved, I mean, how many nationalities among you, but we have 75 people involved, enrolled at least, and I'm sure that this will enormously enrich not only your personal experience, but also the understanding of the complexity of the issues related to migration. And the fact that you have different backgrounds will nurture, I'm sure, and feed significantly the discussion that you will have in class and during the afternoon sessions of training. I think I can stop here. I will be physically present tomorrow and the day after, but and so I look forward to meeting most of you in person. But in the meantime, I only indulge to thank all the team that worked behind this new edition, Daniela, Francesco, Michela, Giampiero, Cristina, and all the others. I'm sure I will miss someone else, Julia, who is not present with us. We are a great group. We are closely linked, and I'm sure that the good energy that feeds our group will also be perceived by
There seems to be a connection problem. Okay, I guess I can, yeah. Mario?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. More or less. It's freezing again. Okay. Okay, I guess I can continue what Mario was.
Okay. I'm back. I'm sorry. I had a network issue. But I was concluding, just wishing all the participants the best for this week. So I leave you the floor, Daniela.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad and honored to see so many people connected and also in presence in Viterbo. It's a pleasure. And this is the 3rd edition of the Summer Training School. And as Mario was telling us, For us, this summer training school is the most precious jewels in the crown of the Center of Excellence on the Integration of Migrants in Europe. And we are grateful to all of you because thanks to your participation and engagement, we can improve our teaching methods within this very experimental summer training school. During this week, you will have the opportunity to get in touch with our academic community. And of course, for those of you who are in presence or are on site with the beautiful city of Viterbo. And for this also, we are grateful. We truly believe that the most important part of our job of the university is the student body. So this is for you. This week is for you. And attending the school, you will help us improve and build up a truly international university at Tuscia. At the same time, one of the most important goals and missions of the summer school is to offer all participants a sort of mix between theoretical and practical skills. So we are trying to mix up seminars and training sessions and make them as interactive as possible. And for these reasons, we have designed morning classes that are seminar-based, an afternoon session where you will be the protagonist and you will experiment different techniques of advanced teamwork, brainstorming, co-creation. In terms of content, as Mario was anticipating, this year's summer training school explores how technology and artificial intelligence are affecting the administrative and operational management of migration flows, and are having a lasting impact on the enjoyment of migrants and refugee rights. So key legal issues arising from the use of cutting-edge technologies and AI in migration and asylum policies have been grouped around under four main headings. The first is the progressive datification of EU borders and the socio-political consequences. The second is fundamental rights implication and data-driven borders. The third is accountability concerns and regulatory aspects behind the use of digital technologies for migration purposes. And last but not the least, the role of new technologies in the integration of migrants in Europe. So the entire course has been designed to challenge a very well-established idea that law and technology are a sort of parallel universes where law, deals with rights and obligation and description and attribution of rights and obligation, whereas technology is a sort of instrument, is a tool, it's a mere tool to enhance the efficiency of interstate cooperation, at least at the European Union level. This school once intends to challenge this assumption and demonstrate the transformative power of technology on law by examining its potential and actual impact in a very specific and topical field, which is EU migration and asylum policies. So all the opportunities and hindrances that underpin the relationship between law and technology in this very specific area of EU action will be explored not only from a European perspective, this is another asset of our school, and through an interdisciplinary approach in which we mix law and political sciences and all the knowledges which are important to, understand and cluster the complexity of the interaction observed. For this reason, the afternoon training sessions will be devoted to exploring the macro issues addressed in the morning sessions from a different angle, to allow the participants to master the different techniques of negotiation and dissemination. The trainings will be all supported and coordinated by our school trainers, Cristina, Giampiero, Michela, and Raul, together with our tutors, Francesco and Giulia. So they will be your guardian angels for all the duration of the school. The participants, so you all led by a group leader, will be divided into working groups and will work in breakout rooms on Zoom or on site under the coordination of the trainers with a specific task, which is discussing one of the macro issues of the morning sessions and draft a document expressing the group views. Those group activities have been designed with the geographical and gender diversity in mind, which are intrinsic value of this school and of the Center of Excellence. In addition, all those activities are competitive and adversarial. So the trainers will declare a winning group for each session, and the best results of the training session will be published on the official website of the Center of Excellence. Finally, and coming to conclusion, on Friday, those of you who are in person are invited to attend the morning session in the beautiful city of Montefiascone, near Viterbo. So a shuttle bus will pick us up and at these two at 9 a.m. in the morning and take us to Rocca dei Papi in Montefiascone. After the morning lectures, we have planned some free time activities in Montefiascone before saying goodbye. So please stay tuned and be ready to this closing party. Now, before handing over to our distinguished speakers, which are very welcome, a few technical announcements. Attendance to the summer school will be verified on a regular basis, and participants must attend at least 80% of the classes to receive a certificate of attendance, while local students, so those who are enrolled at Tuscia University, will also receive 8 credits, provided that they attend 100% of the classes. So it is compulsory the attendance of all the lectures for local students to be granted credits. Lectures, seminars, and training sessions will be all recorded. This is our recording policy, so please be aware of it. Of course, you all are strongly encouraged to turn on your camera for attendance purposes, but also to make the school more lively. And to facilitate the verification of attendance, you are all requested to log in with your full name, so name and surname. We will not admit, for security reasons, those who are not logged with the full name. Thank you for your attention and welcome to the INTIMI Summer Training School. Enjoy it. I guess, Francesco, if you want to.
Shall I just introduce myself?
Yes, thank you. All right, thank you for this opening address, Mario and Daniela. Okay, I guess we can start, definitely. So shall I introduce our first lecture? Do you want Mario and Daniela to do it? I can do it as you wish.
Yes, Francesco, please go ahead.
All right, okay, thank you very much. So indeed, let's start with our first guest, with our first lecture. It's a pleasure to have today with us Derya Ozkul. She will open the first day of the summer school, which is devoted to this topic: the new European borders, the role of technology in immigration control. Derya's lecture is about artificial intelligence and migration management, potentialities, and Perils. So Derya is a senior researcher fellow at the Refugee Studies Center, Department of International Development of the University of Oxford. Her research explores topics like migration policies, or the lack of migration policies, their impact on migrants and refugees. Also, she has been doing research on the use of new technologies in migration and asylum governance, and their impact on migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. And Derya is currently working on the AFAR project, Algorithmic Fairness for Asylum Seekers and Refugees. So it's a pleasure, Derya, to have you here. welcome to the summer school, and I leave you the floor.
Thank you so much. So hello, everyone. I'm really sorry I'm not there in person today. I was really hoping actually to be in Italy, and I can already see you with all t-shirts and warm clothes. And here it's 18 degrees in the UK, and it's been expected to rain all week as well. So I really envy all of you right now. So it's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm very happy to see that there are participants from not just Europe, but also beyond European countries as well. So really happy to see the diversity. And thanks so much also to start with Mario Savino and Daniela Vitiello, who invited me to this summer school. So I very much look forward to interacting with all of you in this lecture, but also beyond. I will leave all my contact details for further communication as well. So just as a disclaimer, so I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal scholar, I'm a political sociologist, and I know the majority of you are legal scholars or students. So because of that, I have designed this lecture particularly just to give you a background idea of the types of technologies that are used in Europe and their possible implications. So it will be very introductory, as this is also the first lecture as well, just introducing you to the field and what is happening in this field. But just for me to understand perhaps your research, and obviously we are a very large group today, so I won't be asking each of you, but if you can maybe just put your hands up, how many of you are researching in the area of migration and technology? May I just try to understand the level? Okay, all right, great. And how many of you are, yeah, Marco as well. How many of you are also researching in the area of technology and asylum specifically? Okay, great. So there are a few. Excellent. So, okay, so in today's, I'd like to also note that this will be, even though I'm online here, I know some of you are online as well, so I will be doing most of the talking, but in fact, this will be a very interactive class, I hope. So I can see the room in Viterbo as well, so please do put your hands up whenever you have a question. I will also have some discussion questions as well along the way. Put any questions in the comment section as we go along. So I really hope that this will be interactive and not just me speaking for 1.5 hours. Okay, so I'll start the lecture with a video. Well, first of all, let me share the screen. And do let me know if you can see can you see my slides well? With no notes, I hope. Okay.
Yes,
Great.
we can.
Excellent. So I'll start the lecture with a video from explaining the types of technologies that are used not in Europe, but in the US-Mexico border. And these are really a variety of technologies that are used, but they're also quite similar to the ones that are used in EU external borders. I'd like to just open it up for with this video, mostly because we will be seeing a variety of technologies, but also we'll be seeing the perspective of border officers and how they perceive these technologies and how they work with them. Just a disclaimer before I start, I really dislike the music in this video. I couldn't stand it when I was watching it, to be honest. It's one of the kind of hip hop type of music, which, doesn't suit at all to me with the topic. So if you don't like it either, please keep it in mind. So let's start with this, and then I will focus more on the case of Europe specifically.
I want to put my hand in the border. I'm standing in the United States, it's 103 degrees, and I'm looking across a river into Mexico. If someone wanted to, they could just swim across in like 2 minutes. Border Patrol has all of these mechanisms for making sure that doesn't happen.
Eyes in the sky, GPS coordinates, Conex box, Mission X, array power, the HEVs, there's a laser, alpha flash, shallow draft, riverine vessel, one sensor, another sensor,
Tactical Operations Center, binos and scouts,
mobile units, agents on horseback.
There's been all this talk about building a wall on our southern border. It could cost up to $70 billion.
For the wall, we're building the wall. We're building the wall, folks. We're building the wall.
Turns out there already is kind of a wall. In addition to the hundreds of miles of physical wall that exists, There's a wall of technology, of surveillance, where people and technology and infrastructure spend days and nights staring at the border. That's what I went down to Texas to look at. And I want to understand if the billions of dollars that we spend on this technology is actually worth it. These white blimps, which are actually called aerostats, are tethered to the ground and have cameras on them. These cameras can zoom in to miles and miles away to see what's going on the ground. They can see in the dark with infrared. They're able to see any sort of movement. This thing is called a raid tower. I just spent like 20 minutes inside of the control room. Man, we were able to like zoom in on people on the other side of the border, and it was like super clear and perfectly focused. Then you have seismic sensors.
It's picking up movement. Sensors are set up to kind of create a path. Let's say, you have one sensor go off. A few minutes later, another sensor goes off, so that let's say just know that they're taking a certain route. Now, if it's that one sensor and another sensor, okay, they're taking another route, and you know how long it takes from point A to get all the way to, let's say, the highway. So it kind of gives us an opportunity to gauge the amount of time that we have to respond.
Another way the Border Patrol does its job is with motion sensor cameras, basically cameras that are out in the middle of the brush that have motion trackers on it. So when someone walks by, it takes a photo. Hunters actually use these to track like deer, and they can see where deer are by taking a picture of them whenever they come in front of the camera. Down in this area of southern Texas, there's not a lot of walls, but they use the walls strategically to funnel people to other places, other parts of the border that don't have walls, but where they have cameras and where they have a lot of eyes. Now it's time to go on some boats with the Border Patrol. You have to get past us before you can even touch dry land. One of the tricky things about this specific sector is that there's a really windy river that goes throughout the entire thing. Because of that, a straight line between two cities might be 100 miles, but it covers 300 river miles.
Okay, so I'll just stop here, and it goes on a bit longer. So I want to open up with this because, while I will be focusing on the case of Europe throughout this lecture, what is happening at the EU's external borders are not so much unique to EU or Europe. It is actually happening across the world, especially between US and Mexico border, between US and Canada. Australia and New Zealand are trying and experimenting with lots of different technologies. And all of these countries are also exchanging knowledge between them as well, quite on a regular basis. So what we are seeing in Europe is also as part of a larger picture, which I wanted to mention. So in this lecture, as I said, I will be mentioning mostly the technologies that are used in Europe. I'll start with the methods that I have used in my own research to map out what types of technologies there exist, and also just to share with you what kind of methods we can use in this field, and hopefully you may perhaps add more methods as well. And then I will be looking at the use of new tech in so-called migration management at the state level through automated decision-making systems, but also at the EU level through new information databases. We may or we may not give a break. We'll see how we go. And then in the second part, I would like to mention the use of new technologies that are used in the asylum decision-making / evidence gathering and management. And throughout the lecture, we'll be looking at different implications. So just to mention in the beginning, one of the projects I've been working on is called Algorithmic Fairness for Asylum Seekers and Refugees. And we are a team of, it's a consortium, we're a team of 5 universities working on it. And as the name suggests, it is focusing on fairness-related questions. So looking at procedural fairness, how new technologies do change procedural fairness, but also distributive fairness, and also perceptions of fairness. So for me as a political sociologist, I'm most interested in how these technologies are being used and perceived by immigration authorities and also by migrants themselves. Okay, so just looking at the methods that I have used in my own research, and I'm just laying these out for you to just basically for you perhaps also to explore them, but also maybe to add if you are using any new methods in this area. So to understand what kinds of algorithms states are using at national level, but also at the EU level, it is really difficult to understand. So this is a really difficult area to do research to begin with, because often state authorities do not publicly declare that they are using an algorithm or that they have introduced a new automated system. So it's often through either scandals or through investigative journalists and through leaked documents that we get a sense of what's happening in this field. So because of that, I had to use multiple methods in my own research, and I just want to lay them out for you as well to use or again to add. So I have started my own research with an online questionnaire targeting practitioners in the field with legal aid providers specifically, trying to understand whether they suspect any use of new technology in the immigration processing systems. That didn't result in too much new results, unfortunately, because again, practitioners weren't very well aware of what was happening behind the doors. I have sent out various invitations for in-depth interviews targeting immigration authorities and the police registering migrants and asylum seekers, and some of them have resulted. I mean, I could have very interesting interviews at the end, so this is definitely an area to push through, even though they're a bit reticent in the beginning. I have also initiated a number of parliamentary inquiries. So through interested MPs, I have submitted my questions to the parliament in some countries, again, seeking out interested MPs in this area. Again, I have collaborated with a member of the European Parliament and shared my list of questions for them to review and then to submit to the European Commission. And a final method that I really advocate is the use of freedom of information requests in this field, even though it is again very difficult. Often state authorities come back to us and say, we can't share this because it's national security, we can't share the details of this algorithm, otherwise they will be faking, changing their behavior. Or sometimes if there's a private tech company involved, they would say, there's copyright issues involved, we can't share. But still, there are still ways to push through. And as you are, I assume you're all legal researchers, you know how to do this best. This is really a method that I think have, for me, provided most details about some of the algorithms that I could find out. Okay, so please do let me know if you're using any other methods along the way. So in this lecture, just for the a note on terminology, when I say, so I will be using the term border quite a lot, and I will be dividing the lecture in terms of new technologies that are used before arriving in Europe, when they arrive at the border areas, and then also after they arrive, so after they transit the border, and then when they apply for longer term residency or citizenship, or when they're in an irregular status. So technologies that they are subjected to after they arrive. So I will be using the term border all the time, but when I use it in this lecture specifically, I refer it to physical borders of states and the location where migrants are subjected to that technology. So it's obviously not to deny that borders are increasingly operating both externally and internally. And as we will see as well in this lecture, digital borders function on and beyond territorial borders, obviously. So just for this lecture's sake, just for clarity, I will be referring to physical borders. Okay, so as I mentioned, I will be kind of taking a temporal approach and looking at technologies before arrival. So the first technology that I would like to start with is forecasting tools. Sorry, yeah. So several states and international organizations and a number of EU-funded research projects as well have explored for developing forecasting tools. And the main sort of background to this is the increasing availability of big data, right? So we have more big data now available on media sources, on social media, existing data on the obviously number of people crossing already to Europe and asylum seekers and recognized refugees. So the more big data that there exists, the more sort of hunger and attempts there has emerged to develop some forecasting technologies to predict the number of migrants and asylum seekers that may arrive on European borders. So to begin with, European Union Agency for Asylum and EASO before that developed an early warning and preparedness system in this field. There have been some attempts at the national level. So a number of immigration authorities in Germany, in Sweden and Netherlands, they have developed their own forecasting tools for their own management systems. Also, among the humanitarian actors, you may know Danish Refugee Council has worked together with IBM, and they've developed what is called Foresight Project, which is one of the most accurate tools in this field. Although they can't predict really new conflicts, they can predict what will happen in a few weeks' time of existing conflicts, sort of. And UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, has also developed Jetson project, which you may well be aware of. So there are also some EU-funded research projects. I don't know how many of you are aware there has been an IT flows research project, which did sort of an outcry on Twitter at some time ago. I don't know if you're following it. So it's basically again a research project between computer scientists, but also legal scholars as well involved in the project, and they try to develop a tool, an algorithm, to be able to predict the number of refugees and displaced persons in particular coming to specific countries, but also municipalities within that countries. And it did create huge criticism because one of the partners in the project was Frontex. And from the outside, people thought that they were sharing this data directly with Frontex. Whereas in fact, they were really targeting NGOs that are working in this field, and also municipalities specifically working that will be likely to receive those displaced people. So I have a question just before we start. What do you think about these forecasting technologies, and what are the potential consequences, do you think, of using them in the context of migration management? Do you have, Tatiana, I can see your hand. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I actually had a question of my own, but yeah. So I'm not sure exactly what type of data is being collected for this purpose. So I was wondering what data do they collect and how they do it. But as to the potential consequences, well, first of all, from a fundamental rights perspective, I find it can breach some human rights. For example, the right to start with, the most obvious would be the right to privacy, and as practical consequences in migration management, I think it can also trigger a knee-jerk effect to further enhance the policy of Fortress Europe to keep people out. So I think that these would be the things that come to mind.
Exactly. Yeah. So just to answer your first question, so each of them uses different sources of big data, but most of them are using news sources. Again, just processing of them. There's some conflict indexes that at the local level, they're sort of screening through potential conflicts that are happening, and they aggregate all of that data and then come up with a prediction. So all the data are anonymized. So in terms of privacy issues, they're not targeting any individual as such. They can't see specific names, even though they look at social media data as well. So it doesn't cause too much problem in terms of privacy, perhaps. But of course, it is quite double-sided, right? The consequences are, I mean, if they can be used in an ideal world, they could be used for humanitarian purposes, so that, if there's a huge conflict happening, you could gather all the resources together to welcome those people as best as possible. Although, however, of course, so that research project, for example, IT Flow's objective was that, so they were trying to support municipalities that would be receiving potential displaced people. But then again, obviously, I mean, the current political environment where there are already increasing pushbacks, I can't see any optimistic side of it, and it's on the contrary, it can actually be used if there's an expected increasing displaced people coming to Europe. Definitely there would be more border controls trying to stop them as well. So it is quite double-sided, but there has been huge criticism from the civil society exactly for that reason. So this is one type of technology that we should be aware of, and there is a huge controversy around civil society as well, trying to ban the use of forecasting, specifically when they increase pushbacks. Okay, so sorry, I can't see from time to time the chat. So if there's any urgent questions, please you can intervene at any time. Okay, so from now on, I will be looking at the type of different risk assessments and automated processing that are happening at the state level, and then we'll look at the EU level. So at the state level practices, we see that some countries have started automated processing of visas and also residency applications. And I mean, these are very kind of initial practices, so they haven't fully automated the process yet. But for example, Sweden, migration agency in Sweden has automated some parts of their assessment, looking basically, it's a rule-based system, so which means like there's a question and the algorithm calculates whether it's a yes and no, and then it goes to the next question, sort of. So they can verify the age according to ID cards, they can verify the presence of sponsorship. So certain types of questions that they can answer as yes and no, they have automated. But there's always a case officer checking each stage manually as well. Norway is one of the more advanced, in brackets, countries in this field. So they have explored various technologies, and one of them is automating the processing of applications for family immigration. So they have automated the full process, but they're not still very happy with the data quality. And then also because they're asking for consent from applicants, whether or not they consent for their application to be subject to automated processing, many people still haven't consented for that. So because of that, only a quarter of the applications are automated for now. So we see sort of really small steps in among some states trying to explore whether they can automate the full process of some of these visa processing. Another, and we will be getting more riskier and more controversial practices slowly. So another practice that is happening in a number of countries now, mostly in UK and Netherlands, is the processing of visas through risk assessments. So again, these countries haven't automated the process itself, but they have categorized applicants according to a certain risk criteria. So in the UK, this happened with just tourist short-term visa applications between 2015 and 2020. And it was only halted because 2 civil society organizations have been very active in this field, trying to understand what the Home Office was trying to do. And then they could figure out that actually they were using a visa streaming tool, categorizing basically applications according to green, amber, and red into 3 categories. According to a set risk criteria. And they found out that the Home Office had a list of suspect nationalities. And if you were coming from one of those suspect nationalities, your application would be automatically categorized as red, so as the higher score, which meant that you would be receiving more scrutiny from the caseworker. So if it is a green country, let's say a green risk criteria, then your application would be most likely to be processed as positive, because the caseworkers do process them quite fast. So they have to do like 90 per day. So it would be quite probably processed as positive, whereas the ones that in the higher risk would be more likely to be rejected. They also figured out that the whole system was having a feedback loop problem. So that meant that if there were more applications from one specific country or one specific profile, gender and age, let's say, and if they were receiving more rejections over time, applications with the same characteristics would also be more likely to be receiving higher rejections as well. So they really worked on this through FOI requests and trying to understand what was happening at the Home Office, and then took it to the court. And the Home Office didn't want to go to the court because if they did, they would have to explain the specifics of the algorithm. So they said, okay, we will halt the practice completely. We won't be using it anymore, which is great. They're not using it anymore. But then because they don't have to declare it publicly, we don't actually know whether they have started, or they can start it any other day, and we may not know it either. So there is a continuous inspection needed in this area to understand what they're actually doing. A very similar practice exists in Netherlands. It's the same logic. So basically, again, triaging applications according to a set risk criteria in this one, and then basically assessing the higher risk applicants receive more scrutiny from caseworkers and are more likely to be rejected than the other ones. So here it's slightly different in the sense that they compare each application with previous applications from the same person. So if the person previously came to the country and he or she hasn't overstayed, hasn't applied for asylum, so it can be categorized as lower risk. But if it has, then if he or she has, then it would be a higher risk category and more likely to be rejected. So in this one, another difference is that within the IND, the Immigration Authority in Netherlands, the appointed data protection officer has constantly complained about the possibly discriminatory nature of this visa algorithm, but has received no answer. So there was no success with that, and it didn't go anywhere. And then it was found out through sort of a scandal through an investigative journalist within Lighthouse Reports. Okay, so sorry. So it's not only migrants who are being subjected to these technologies and who are being subject to risk assessments. More and more we see also other actors in the migration fields being screened and assessed according to some certain risk criteria. So again, in the Netherlands, IND used an algorithm to assess possible sponsors who wanted to have the recognized sponsorship title. So if companies have this title, they can sponsor workers and their application will be processed quite easily. So a lot of companies obviously are applying for this to be able to sponsor. And IND has used the risk criteria to assess whether these companies were genuine companies and were also, complying with the rules in the Netherlands. And the risk category that they used were sort of innocent. But what has been found out was that the IND was also storing some additional data in their system for future possible analysis, and which included the ethnic composition of the board of the company. So they were categorizing each company under the banner of either Dutch, if the majority of the board members were Dutch, or under the banner of Western, or under the banner of non-Western. So they didn't put this into the algorithm, but they were storing it for future purposes. And then it came out, and it was also a huge scandal in the parliament, and the practice was halted 2 years ago. So we just see that basically, I mean, with this, we see that it's not only migrants, but all the other actors that are present in migration management that are being constantly subjected to these kind of risk assessment systems. Okay, so looking at the EU level practices. So as you all know, and I understand most of you work in this field as well, or I assume, but do let me know if you're not. So more than obviously 100 countries currently need short-term visas to enter the Schengen area, and around 60 countries don't need a visa, but they will soon need a travel authorization to enter the EU. So currently, there are three main large information databases. The first one being Schengen Information System, which is processing biographic and biometric information of third country nationals and missing persons under arrest or warrant. And the other one is the Eurodac, processing the fingerprints of asylum applicants and irregular migrants according to Dublin procedure, as I assume you may all well know. The first country that they register needs to be the one processing their application. So to check whether or not the person has entered Europe from a different country. And the third one being the Visa Information System, which is processing biographic and biometric data of third country nationals applying for short-term visas. So what is happening right now is that the EU in the Schengen area, there are currently under development 3 new information systems. The first one, EESS, will be looking at third country nationals traveling for short stay. The ETIAS will be processing biographical information only of visa-exempt third country nationals. And the third one, ECRIS, will be processing information on previous convictions by criminal courts in the EU. So all of these information systems and what is changing overall. So as you can see in the picture, and I will tell more about the Eurosur and PNR system as well. So as soon as there is a boat detected, for example, by Eurosur, or the passenger fills in their data in the PNR system, that data is being checked by profiles with prior to landing. And if there is any flag dangerous individuals at the border area, the border guard then requests more information from the travelers. And if the traveler still presents a red flag, then or if they had their visa cancelled before, or used a stolen document before, or is in a wanted list, then they are sent for further investigation. And you can see that each national, sorry, I just need to change this here. Yeah, so you can see that each member state's national system, information systems, are being constantly linked with 3 existing information systems managed by EU LISA. So if there was a visa cancelled before, VIS puts that data into the national system. If there is a stolen documents, if there's an alert about it, or if the person wasn't a wanted list, then that information comes from SIS. And if the fingerprint matches with pre-existing records and there's an asylum request previously registered in another country or denied in another country, that information comes from Eurodac. So you see that all the information systems with national systems separately working in the existing system. So what will happen? Sorry. So what will happen in the with the new framework? So just to mention, sorry. So initially, each of these information systems were designed to operate separately, but as around 2015 and 2016, as the number of asylum seekers arriving in Europe started to increasing and Europe's refugee crisis happened, there were these ideas around interoperability started to be discussed for the first time. And in 2019, interoperability framework was established with 2 regulations. So I won't go into details of all the different modalities, but what we're seeing is that now all the information systems from next year onwards will be working together and in relation to each other. And EU LISA, in one of their reports, indicates that machine learning can also be used when dealing with suspicious applications in order to support caseworkers with risk assessments. So it's a totally new system of assessing an application. If machine learning is used, that means that an individual will not be only assessed according to their individual criteria versus a preset risk criteria, but they will also be assessed according to clusters of that profile, of similar profile to them in that particular time. So for example, let's say, I don't know if it's too complicated or how much you're familiar with this, but let's say, for example, in July 2024, let's say, a single mother from Morocco, let's say, with 3 children staying at home. Around that time, that profile, people with that profile coming to Europe were not seen as posing low risk. So that person will also be assessed according to that cluster in that particular time in period. And they will be also seen as low risk. For example, I mean, I'm making this up. But for example, let's say in that month, someone coming from Senegal, young man, an unemployed person, because that profile is seen as higher risk in that particular time, that applicant will also be seen as high risk in comparison to that cluster that he is in that particular time in history. So it may well be that if machine learning is used, it may well be that a month before, perhaps the same profile would be seen as lower risk, and his friend, for example, could get a visa, but he would not be able to get a visa because his application would be assessed according to the cluster that he is in that specific time, if I can make it clear. So it's really changing how migration, how border control is operating if machine learning will be used in this system. Okay, so I don't want to be doing all the talking here. So what are your thoughts in general about the potential effects of using automated risk assessments? Any ideas? And I'll check the chat in the meantime. Yeah, great. Okay, I can't see hands here. It's a bit... Yes, Agnese Palazzi. Do I pronounce correctly?
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. I think that one of the most important potential effects that using automated risk assessment in migration management could be that actually also from a fundamental rights perspective, we will have a general assessment, and we will forget the assessment of individual cases. I mean, just to be more precise, in the case of asylum application, if we consider that people coming from well, Iraq or other countries, if we use a sort of risk assessment tool, we could fail into the possible potential mistake to assess generally his or her application in basing her application in on her or his nationality. Of course, migration management is something different from asylum management cases, but actually the cultural impact of the implementation of this kind of tool could affect also the other issues, other fields in the context of migration more in general. I don't know if it is clear. Sorry for this emotion.
Yeah, absolutely, it's clear. Ismini, did you want your second on my list? Yeah.
Yes, hi, I'm sorry for looking elsewhere, but it's just that the monitor is situated in another place on the laptop. So I was thinking, I agree with Agnese, actually. There's a set of fundamental rights that are not very often referred to, a bit lately maybe in the bibliography. Initially, it was only the right to privacy in the first set of very obvious rights to be interfered with. So I would go as far as to say that the right to asylum also might be interfered with, because if someone is through risk assessment, let's say filtered, and never has the option to actually apply for asylum, it's a very obvious interference. And then even the principle of non-refoulement, I would say, which I work on, because through risk assessment, someone might be, again, prevented from entering, and as a result, they might be indirectly, let's say, refouled to their country of origin, where they might be in danger. But this is in dialogue with what Agnese said about a case-by-case basis, because if there is no evaluation, then we talk about a set of very, very essential human rights that are in danger, and then the right to privacy would follow, because one would have to enter before having the right to privacy interfered with, I would say.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, all agree. Camila and Isabel. First, Camila.
Yes. Hello, good morning, everyone. So apart from what has been already said about this collectivization, for example, of asylum applications, from a technological perspective, I see also a risk for these systems to be biased, to be kind of hijacked. I'm not a professional in technology, but you talked about the interoperability of EU systems, and what came to my mind is, if one system can be biased, then if it's interconnected to other systems, then if there is a problem in one system, that affects all the systems, right? So it's
absolutely
actually, if you could provide some information on this interoperability, it would be nice. It's very interesting how they actually work together. Thank you.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. Yes, Isabel. Yeah.
Hi, good morning. So I think the issue actually it's not specifically about the automated risk assessment or the use of technology, but when we say, okay, this could be a biased system, but I think the whole idea is that the use of this technology is now, they are trying to fasten the process that they are already doing, because I mean, for me, it's obvious that the system is already biased. So they are just trying to find a way to do it faster, what they do with personal or people risk assessment. So I think the question is that they are trying to make it in a faster way. Yeah. So we cannot see technology or EA or all these algorithms as neutral things. They are being used in a purpose. So everything that we'll be seeing, I think, will be biased because we are talking about what is the EU whole policy on migration and refugees and all, asylum seekers and all that. So I think the issue is that we will be facing a faster way to make people to stay out of EU. So I think for me, that's it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I haven't mentioned this, but so with the risk assessments at the national level, the ones that are used by UK and Netherlands, so they found out that the algorithm had a risk of list of suspected nationalities, and that was obviously discriminatory. But of course, these institutions were already assessing countries before. I mean, before any use of technology, they already had a manual list of suspected nationalities, right? They already have a list of risky nationalities, so-called. So what the algorithm actually did was to make that visible once we knew that they were using a technology, and then it was much clearer to argue that it was discriminatory, because before it was much more difficult also to find out that they were doing that. So yes, you're exactly right. I mean, they were already doing these, and these are not sort of new methods of selecting applications. Yeah. Yes, Alice.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I just wanted to add that one other layer of risks that I see is that a preventive-based approach is very much integrated both into legal reasoning and in policy making, I would say, when automated risk assessments are integrated in border management at large and asylum proceeding as well. And the very idea of risk is integrating a known future in present considerations, in present analysis, which I would say is quite the opposite than adopting a rights-based perspective. So you anticipate something from the future instead of taking into account something that happened in the past, for example, that might be result in a specific condition of vulnerability. So what is at stake, I would say, is something quite huge in terms of reasoning, not just about specific rights, but in terms of the structure.
Absolutely. So up until now, risk was being understood as someone posing a risk to the community, let's say, because of the crime that they did before and so on. Whereas with these systems, the risk is calculated according to a future risk of overstay or applying for asylum is the other one, according to other applicants. So not according to this applicant doing anything wrong, but according to a similar cluster that this applicant would be falling in time in that specific time. So it's a different understanding of calculating risk and understanding risk. And it's absolutely, as you say, Alice, it's very much future oriented. So it's a total shift in that sense. I will be sharing a lot more on interoperability in sources and resources, and I will email them to you as well. I think I'm trying to cover perhaps too much in this lecture, so I am going a bit sort of fast, but I will share any resources that you may be interested, hopefully, in this field. So, but overall, I mean, what
Derya,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We would also have a couple of questions from students here in the classroom.
Okay. Sorry, I can't see the class now. Yes,
so
please, yes.
We're gonna circulate the microphone here, and
yes, please, yeah.
Let me know if you can hear the students.
Yes, oh yeah, I can.
Okay.
Okay, so
yeah,
audible?
You can yeah, go ahead.
Great.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so yeah, bias, interoperability, in the sense that I see that also from the article you spoke about the temporary nature of these, technology, in the sense that it changes from stage to stage, and so my point exactly is just
Voice cut off on my part. I'm really sorry, I can't see the lecture hall. Can anyone else hear? Yeah, now it's come back. Can you say it on the microphone again?
So, can you hear?
Yes, now I can. Yeah, the connection was broken, but now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, I can't hear. Maybe you can ask, you can write in the chat or.
Okay.
Yes,
Now?
yes. Yeah, now I can.
Okay. So the role of case workers and decision makers, right? Because you've been purely about, artificial intelligence, algorithms and all of that.
Oh, I'm really, really sorry. It's not coming through. So I heard the role of caseworkers, right?
Okay, let's try with
for
another
that
microphone, maybe. Otherwise, just come here.
Or
Okay, let's have a second
or
try.
maybe just you can try to sort out the problem and collect the questions for a Q&A session at the end.
Yeah,
So
yeah, sure. Or you can write them in the
Yeah.
chat as well, and I'll try to see.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I don't know what the question was exactly, but it's actually one of the points that I want to highlight as well about caseworkers. So, I mean, first of all, the whole interoperability framework overall is really increasing this, what is called data surveillance, right? So data surveillance through increased automation and aggregated risk assessments over individuals' personal data and potentially transforming into a security union. So, I mean, it's already happening, obviously, we see, but it is increasing at an exponential rate. It's also potentially will have discriminatory outcomes as creating data-driven suspicious profiles. And if machine learning is used, then it will be, those clusters will change in real time according to different characteristics. There's also already in existing information systems, there's quite a lot of poor data. I mean, this all already exists, basically stemming from, case officers who wrote some names by mistake, or documents weren't attached in the right case file, or sometimes biometrics were attached to incorrect files. So these already exist, but when all of these systems will be compiled together, they can lead to incorrect results, and obviously put the burden of proof on the person and cause stress for migrants. Most importantly, and you may know about this much better than I do, the lack of effective oversight mechanisms and the right to effective judicial review, right? So these information systems will not be subject to the same judicial review as in EU AI Act, as for companies using new technologies, new AI as well. Lastly, an area that is not so much well known yet is what will be the impact on officers and manual decision making. So previously, when a border officer, for example, when they saw that the person didn't match with the biometric when they came to them, and when their biometrics didn't match what was in the system, previously they would still be doing the manual checking themselves, and they could let them go. I mean, they can still let them go. But now with the interoperability framework, if the system flags the hit, and if they flag that the person has a certain risk, we don't know yet how officers will be behaving. So whether they will be relying too much on technology, or whether they will say, yes, but this person really looks like the person that on the picture, or whether they will think that if technology is flagging, then there must be some issue, and maybe, I shouldn't be accepting this person, or maybe they will be taking it to too many senior officials and it will be taking too long. So we don't know exactly the effects on case officers and how they will be behaving alongside these technologies. Okay, I'd like to show you a video here. So this is prepared by Access Now. It's a civil society organization, in case you don't know, who works in this area quite actively. And the reason I would like to show is because it's including some testimonials from people who were subjected to technologies. Obviously, it's voiced by someone else, not a migrant, not a real migrant.
We are Black and the border guards hate us. Their computers hate us too.
The use of border surveillance technologies across the European Union is reinforcing systemic oppression and threatening the rights and lives of people migrating, seeking refuge or asylum, and anyone living with an irregular immigration status. Authorities are deploying dangerous technologies, biometric systems that identify people by fingerprints, biased algorithms that profile them as potential criminals, and drones that scan the borders, under the guise of securing the European borders, knowing that they lend legitimacy to their racist policies. And it's only getting worse. The EU security budget is set to increase by 123% to a total of 43.9 billion euro by 2027. There is a whole web of international institutions, the security industry, law enforcement authorities, and governments, the border tech industrial complex, gaining and profiting from human rights violations at and within their borders.
During the night, there are drones. You see them, they see you. You cannot cross the border during the night because when the police catch you at night, they beat you a lot. They break you. I feel like a piece of meat without a life, just fingerprints and eye scans. One day, the police stopped me at a bus station in Paris and demanded my ID for no reason at all. So they took my fingerprints on a mobile device. They knew I was undocumented. I was immediately detained.
Border surveillance technologies are fundamentally incompatible with human rights and have no place anywhere. EU authorities, institutions, and policymakers must stop using them and protect people on the move. Spread the word. Help us pressure authorities to abandon technologies that reproduce and reinforce systemic oppression.
So I just wanted to share this in case you're not aware. There's a coalition of civil society organizations working actively in this field. It's called Protect Not Survey. You may look it up on Google. They are working specifically on EU AI Act as well, and yeah, doing lots of activism in this area. Okay, oops, sorry. Yeah, so just following up with this. So the use of tech around the border areas. I mean, I mentioned this in the image before, but Eurosur is also constantly looking for scanning the border areas through drones, offshore sensors, and satellites, remote sensing technologies, again, to detect and map out persons and vehicles. It's quite similar to the one that we've seen at the between US and Mexico border. It's being managed by Frontex and obviously quite widely criticized. There's also the passenger name record system. So whenever a traveler wants to travel to Europe, they before entering just the border, they have to enter their names, and that data is also being checked against existing information systems. It's decentralized and managed by individual countries. So I won't share this video because I think, yeah, we don't have much time, but I'll leave this with you. It's really showing what types of technologies are used around the border area. There are some other interesting, oops, sorry. There are some other interesting technologies as well that are growing. So with digitalization and now with visa applications being able to do digitally, more and more, when you upload your documents onto the online system, more and more there's an exploration around whether these documents can be also scanned through AI-based tools to make sure that they are genuine documents. So right now it's only in Netherlands, the IND is using them, and there are some other pilot cases, but we will see this probably more and more as digitalization is right now growing among many other countries. There are some also research projects in this area as well. There is also, I mean, I'm just now putting some flash notes around what types of really different technologies that there exist. There's also most widely criticized emotion recognition technology. So in the beginning, it started with the iBorder project, which was funded by under EU Horizon 2020, and it was tested in 3 countries. So it combined biometric verification together with deception detection and other document authentication as well. So the one that I just mentioned. So essentially it's a 2-tiered assessment. So what they envisaged was that before a traveler was coming to Europe, before they arrive at the border, they would be taking a video interview through an avatar, with an avatar, and their facial features would be tested according to see whether or not they are lying. And then when they come to the border, that features would be compared with what they say at the border, and if they raise a flag, then they would be seen as high risk and they would be scrutinized further. So let's just see very quickly what this project is about, just for you to see how the system works on the website. And this is done by iBorder, one of the research team members. So just wondering, can you see this, or do I need to make it?
iBorder Control is an intelligent border control system that's being developed as part of the Horizon 2020 programme funded by the European Union with 13 partners across Europe. The idea is we want to create faster and safer borders for the general public as they travel across Europe. It features lots of new innovative technologies. Part of that is the automated deception detection system that's been developed at Manchester Metropolitan University that uses new artificial intelligence techniques. A person who will engage in this system will actually, first of all, do some pre-traveller registration online through a system. And as part of that, they will be interviewed by an avatar border guard. This border guard will ask a series of questions typical to what you would see when you cross borders in Europe by real border guards.
What is your surname?
My surname is Khan.
And each one will be analysed by our automated deception detection system to see whether a person is lying or not for a particular question. How does it do this? Well, it uses non-verbal behaviour, very, very fine-grained micro gestures. So we're not looking at things like smiling or frowning. We're looking at very small movements, such as an eye moving left or right. So we use this and combine it together with a risk score. And we use this in order to say for a particular question whether someone's lying or not. Of course, it's not just our product, our particular application that gives the risk score. It actually combines within the system to give an indication to the border guard when the person comes to the border whether or not they should go through straight away or they need to be asked a few individual questions. So it's a human in the loop system. And I think this is very, very important to stress. It does not make a full automated decision. It gives a risk score for each individual traveller.
Okay, so I'll stop here. So basically, I don't know if you could understand it all. So basically, it really explores the facial features of an applicant and tries to understand whether he or she is lying, and then they combine that score with also existing document verification and other sorts of risk assessments. So there have been lots of concerns around technical inaccuracies, especially discriminatory feature of facial recognition, lack of transparency in this project. They haven't published many of their ethical reviews, for example, which they need to. But most importantly, really, these technologies are criminalizing immigrants, and they promote the idea that they should be further and further scrutinized to the point that to see whether or not they're lying through these such technologies. So iBorder project was tested. It's never been implemented. But that has been followed by another research project, Trespass, which is again is looking for similar behavior analysis within airports through the way people walk, and including emotion recognition while being interviewed by border guards and custom officers. So really, really, I think dangerous uses of technology to basically further criminalizing immigrants. Okay, sorry. I don't know how we are doing with time and how you are feeling. Do you want to give us a break, or do you want to continue? Maybe I can ask the room, the ones in the room. Can you do a thumbs up if you want to continue, or can you do like this for break? I can't really see. Francesco, can you see what the...
Well, up to you, Derya, really, but maybe I'm getting from the classroom maybe a wish for a short break.
Okay, sure, excellent.
Like 5 minutes, I don't know, 5 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, let's do 5 minutes and let's move our legs.
Okay.
Here.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, excellent. So I know some of you are not there yet, but let's just quickly start because the time is running. So from now on, we'll be looking at the use of technologies within after migrants arrive in the country and along their migration journey, or along when they try to apply for longer term residency or citizenship or other pathways. So So far, I mean, all the technologies that we've seen so far were not designed to benefit migrants, right? So they were either for surveillance reasons or for automating the processes, but really more so for applying risk assessments along the way. So they weren't designed, you know, at the core thinking about migrants. So the only technology that I would like to highlight is one that is used in Latvia. And in Latvia, basically, the immigration authorities started using speech recognition for migrants, but for basically to help them to prepare for their citizenship test. So basically, they made a survey among migrants who were living in the country for a long time, and they were inquiring why they don't apply for citizenship. And they found out that many people were afraid to apply for the citizenship test because they were required to recite the national anthem, and they didn't trust their Latvian, so they weren't applying for it because they were afraid. They found that in the survey. So to improve that, they thought, okay, maybe we should develop a tool for migrants to practice and to see whether or not they can take the test. I mean, just to make them basically feel more confident along the way. So they developed a tool, and this doesn't change the decision as such. It's just for people to practice their Latvian national anthem and to see basically whether or not they can proceed with application. So really, this is the only case that is designs taking migrants at the core of their design. There are some, so I will be going sort of more from positive to more dangerous uses. So another sort of positive one, I suppose, for most applicants is in Norway, the UDI, the Immigration Authority, has fully automated the processing of citizenship applications. And they started with citizenship because mostly, so migrants who lived in Norway already, so before they apply for citizenship, they must have lived in the country for some time, and the state has already gathered a lot of data about that migrants during the time that they lived. So basically, when they apply for citizenship, they can automatically gather together the information that they have gathered, you know, for how long they've lived in the country, which work they've done, whether or not they've went to integration classes, as they call, whether or not they took Norwegian language classes and so on. And they can automatically come up with the answer whether or not the person is eligible for citizenship, and then they can issue a positive response straight away. So they have automated it fully for all positive applications, and for negative ones, then a caseworker sort of goes through it and issues the decision on his name, basically, I mean, on the name of the UDI. So it's positive for most people whose application basically is speedier. They can get a much speedier response. But then there are also obviously possible mistakes that may exist in other databases, and that may have double domino effect on the citizenship application as well. So it has to be continuously monitored in that sense. A similar application has been used in the EU settlement scheme in the UK. Again, the Home Office in the UK has subjected to applicants again to another triage system. So the ones that have their data on, they can automatically issue them in a very speedy way. But the ones that they don't have the data on, for example, on residency, on their proof of address, and these usually include most vulnerable groups who are potentially homeless or who have to change houses very often. If their data comes up as absent or contradictory at the records, there is a risk that their application remains stuck in the system, or they may receive an incorrect outcome as if they haven't lived in the UK because their address hasn't been in the system correctly. So we see these kind of automated systems along the way for migrants who are inside countries as well. Very similar, I just want to mention, risk assessment again exists for marriage applications in the UK. So if you are a migrant in the UK and if you want to register your marriage or civil partnership with someone, and if you obtain residency rights through that marriage, your application is being assessed by Home Office, and they're looking at a number of risk criteria, And again, they categorize you according to low risk, high risk. And some of the criteria that they're looking at is like the age difference between partners and how partners interact with each other during registration times, whether or not they went to travels together and so on. So it's quite vague in some sense. And it's also, we don't know the full risk criteria that they're using either. So if they're scored as higher risk in this category, then the Home Office can do home visits. So they can come to their houses in the middle of the night, check whether the couple is sleeping together, check whether it's a genuine couple, and so on. So the scrutiny is much higher if they're assessed as being high risk. Okay, another very intrusive technology I would like to mention in the case of Europe is electronic monitoring. So this was actually used in the US first, between the US and Mexico border. So they were, the decision of whether or not to use this was quite opaque in the US case. In the UK, they are using it for migrants who served their sentences in jail and who have been on bail and who may face deportation from the UK. So if those people are found to be high risk to the community, and again, we don't know exactly how that risk is calculated, they are then required to put electronic tags on their ankles, so on their GPS ankles, basically, GPS-based tags on their ankles. If they are found to be medium risk, then they are required to wear facial recognition-based smartwatches and then report regularly to the Home Office 5 times a day by taking their pictures. So there are all sorts of these surveillance technologies that are used also for people on bail. And obviously this one is one of the extreme ones because it's, of course, very intrusive. It's 7 to 24 hours surveillance, basically. They can check through GPS where the person is all the time. It's also causing physical discomfort. Sometimes the tag is very tight. It causes problems when they change their clothes even. There are a lot of difficulties around charging. Some tags were found to be faulty, so people have to spend just next to a plug-in for 2 hours sometimes. And then obviously it does lead to discrimination among social circles and finding employment, and then leading to severe mental health consequences. So it's an awful intrusive way of technology, and it is used on migrants who have already served their sentence, so who are not in theory criminal anymore, but really furthering criminalization of migrants furthermore. So I won't show this video just for time purposes, but here it is on the slide if you're interested in this technology, and I have a lot more information in some sources as well. Okay, so I quickly would like to talk about the technologies that are used in asylum, because I know some of you were interested in asylum decision making. So so far, none of the I mean, if I have time, I'll look at state level, but also humanitarian organizations level practices. So far, there are no uses of automated decision-making as such in asylum decision-making. As you know, it's usually done on a case-by-case basis. So there's no sort of, at full-scale automated decision-making, although there have been some explorations around it as well. But what exists so far is the use of new technologies that help to automate evidence for decision makers. So I assume some of you are already aware with the asylum decision-making process, where basically one of the most important aspects of decision-making deals with identification of the person. If the person doesn't have an ID card, there are various techniques that are generally used to identify the person. And the second is credibility, so whether the person is telling the truth or not. So in order to, and there have been various techniques to understand these and to evaluate these, to interrogate the asylum seeker, basically. So for credibility, normally there would be a person asking for language analysis, identifying whether the person is telling the country of origin that they come from, whether that's true. There would be different interrogation techniques to find out whether the person is telling the truth, and so on. So those techniques still exist, but there have been some uses of additional technologies that are used to add more evidence into the practice, basically. So one of them, I will skip name transliteration, but one of them is dialect recognition. So I'll go straight to dialect recognition. So this started in Germany by BAMF. in 2017. It actually started, I mean, the whole idea started after 2015-16 period, again, when there were a number of, high number of asylum seekers coming. So BAMF started, had to decide on certain cases in very short amount of time, like in 30 minutes. And there was a huge pressure from top to down at the time to decide to make decisions as quickly as possible because there were too many number of asylum seekers. So some of the asylum seekers at the time didn't have their valid passports. So BAMF, instead of just believing the asylum seeker that they would be Syrian or Afghan as they were claiming to be, they decided to explore new technologies to identify the person. So they worked with a tech company called Nuance, and they developed speech recognition. So the tool that they developed basically generates an automated report showing, so basically how it works is the person speaks over a phone for 2 minutes, and that speech is recorded, and then a text automated text is generated through the tool, showing the applicant's speech according to probabilistic outcomes. So it will say like 60%, this person speaks 60% Arabic Levantine, 20% Arabic Gulf, 5% Turkish, and so on. And you can see the report here at the right side. So it shows basically the outcome in probabilistic terms. And this is very much against what was happening before. So before, language analysis would be written in qualitative terms, like it would be written, this person is very likely Syrian, or this person is very likely Egyptian, and so on. Whereas now it is written in probabilistic terms, and it is also showing various different other languages as well. So the practice started quite quickly at the time and also expanded in time. So it started with Arabic dialects, then went on to Persian and Pashto dialects, and Kurdish is also on the pipeline. So there have been some concerns around how costly this was, because it is really costly, and that cost hasn't decreased over time. The maintenance cost is quite a lot as well. But more importantly for me, it really created a technified evidence for the asylum procedure, right? So before, what was a qualitative evidence written by language analysts, now it is more quantifiable evidence that is automated through a technology, through a tool. And again, we don't know how caseworkers behave vis-a-vis this report. So it is one thing to see that this person is like a Syrian, compared to this person is 50% Syrian. So we don't know, again, the impact on caseworkers, and there are no statistics around this because they don't write that the decision was rejected based on this report alone. So this report only constitutes one of the evidence that is collected in the asylum process. So we don't know the exact impact, but basically what it does is creating a technified evidence for the asylum procedure and really putting the burden of proof more on the asylum seeker to respond, to make his claim and to prove that he is really from the country that he says he is. And moreover, it's also showing BAMF as a modern and innovative and pioneer public administration, right? So BAMF in Germany has won awards for the best digitization project with these technologies. So beyond what is happening ethically, it's also really changing the position of BAMF as a public administration among other public administrations. So we have to also try to understand how BAMF is behaving when it introduces these technologies. The other one, again, another technique that is used for identifying country of origin, but also to verify whether the person is telling the truth or not, is mobile phone data extraction that is increasingly used in the asylum procedure in Europe. And I don't know if any of you is particularly studying this, but it's a really growing field and you should really look into it, I think. So it's used in several countries, also used in BAMF. So I will just explain BAMF case very briefly. The tool was developed again with private tech companies, mostly forensic companies. And it was, BAMF says that it was only used when there is a clear need for it, but then it has been found out that they actually use it quite regularly during registration process from asylum seekers who didn't have valid IDs with them. And again, what it does, what it does is to provide, again, another layer of technified evidence for decision makers and increased burden of proof on applicants. So the mobile phone data extraction issues another automated report showing that this person spoke, with countries from, made calls to these countries, used these languages in their messages, and they can also track the geodata through the pictures on their phone and the route that they've taken. So if there are any inaccuracies, and there may be, because people on the road usually share their mobile phones, or sometimes there are just technical inaccuracies as well on geodata, then in case of any contradictions, it is up to the asylum seeker to explain that he or she is really telling the truth. So it really increases the burden of proof without really understanding how the report is being generated, without really understanding how the software really works. So this practice in Germany was challenged at the Federal Constitutional Court, and it was found unlawful, but it is continuing in several other countries, and it's really changing the relationship between decision maker and applicant. Okay, I know we are coming to the end, so I will skip these parts and maybe come to the conclusion. I know we have very few minutes, so I will unfortunately skip, but I'm more than happy to stay in touch with all types of other tech that are on the slides and also on resources that I will be sharing. So just some key points from this very introductory lecture, I assume. So we have seen that a number of various new technologies have entered this field. Some of them have entered with specific purposes around surveillance, but some of them have entered also through just automate the process with little scrutiny over their impacts on migrants and also on state officers. We don't really know how state officers will change their behavior when they make their decisions through these automated tools. Within the field of migration, automated decision-making processes may help some migrants to have a speedier process, as we've seen, but then they can also disadvantage and discriminate against others. Within the asylum field, I haven't been able to touch upon all cases, but basically technified evidence increase the burden of proof on applicants and also change the nature of relationship between decision maker and asylum applicants as well. So, when we look at all technologies in this field, only very few are helpful and only very few are designed to benefit the migrants, but more so, they're generally designed more so to benefit the state administrations themselves, either to decrease their caseloads or to have a speedy response as much as possible. But again, these positive cases are quite exception. So I thank you here. I'm really sad that we don't have enough time, but I also don't want to take time from the next speaker. So please do stay in touch. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, all other social media places. So please stay in touch, and I will again share sources with anyone interested. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Derya. Really a brilliant presentation, a journey from the European Union to the US and then back again to Europe. Really interesting and thought-provoking considerations. We have really a couple of minutes, so I don't know whether there is just maybe one question or two quick questions. We can try again maybe with a question here in the classroom. But we have really 2 minutes. So thank you. Let's see if the microphone works this time.
I can see Ozkul as well.
Yeah, there is a question. Yeah, let's see if it works now.
Can you hear me?
I can. I was, but now it's been muted.
Now?
Yeah. Yes, now, yes.
Great. So I wanted to ask about the role of case workers and decision makers, because I thought that it was an important part of your study. And is training this kind of people enough? Because everybody has a bias, right? I have mine, you have yours, religious, political, ideological, and all of that. Is training enough for case workers to be able to change decisions that are made by algorithms or artificial intelligence or technology, as the case may be? Because, of course, we identify that there are biases and discrimination and all of that. and there is a specific role for case workers and for decision makers, but is training them enough? Is training alone enough? Are there other things that we can do, other levels that we could go? That's my question.
Yes, excellent. So in many of the technologies that I've mentioned, that training is very little, if not existent. So most of the time, the training involves how to use the tool, like specifically how to basically use it. So with dialect recognition, for example, they get training around, how many minutes the person needs to speak and all of those, technical details, but they don't actually get training on how the decision is being made, because that's such a complicated issue in itself. And they're just not giving any training. So it's not just the decision makers, but then when, for example, in asylum cases, when it's taken to courts, judges also do not get any training on these technologies either. So it's really a crucial area. So thank you so much for pointing it out, but I don't think training in any of these technologies is enough for caseworkers. Yeah.
All right. Another question from the classroom, really quickly, please, because we are running out of time. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, and it's quite interesting. But my question is on the pre-arrival, and it was on how migrants are intimated about these technologies to be informed adequately of possibilities of deploying these technologies to access whatever data that is collected from them. How are they being educated on these technologies? Second question is, I foresee a lot of violation when I look at what had been presented. When you talk about the GDPR, if you have to gather someone's data and subject it to automated risk decision-making, it means that the data acquired has to be in a database over time. And this would definitely have some infringement in the GDPR. So what's the right reserved for the migrant whose data is being misused? Because definitely if you get a data and keep it for more than necessary and begin to use it for risk assessment, this definitely hurts the migrants. What are the remedies available for such an individual? Thank you.
Okay, maybe I will gather the questions and answer them by email in our Google Doc, if that's easier, because I know it's very half past now. Yeah. Because the GDPR is quite detailed, and I will answer it more in detail. Yeah. Maybe I'll collect the one from Ozase as well, and I will answer.
Yeah, there is one hand up from a student.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. My question is, you said something. One of the presentations just did you talk about something that the case was challenged in court and was later the constitution was later stopped. I mean, the process was later stopped. One of the in the process of developing this AI or this artificial intelligence to checkmate some of this migration and all that, was it that it was not checked with the legal aspect of the country before it was being implemented, or it was just used to stop migration? It was just an attempt to tackle the issue of migration during that.
I'm really sorry, I couldn't capture the whole question.
Okay, my question goes that before the implementation of some of these AI tools to tackle migration or to checkmate some of this migration, so was it that it was not checked with the laws of the land or the policies to see, or the legal aspect was not checked, that maybe some of them have to be contested again to see that it was against the laws or the constitution of the country?
So whether they were
yes, before the implementation, when the tool was developed, what did the country, did they not envisage the legal aspects to see if it is in line with what the human rights stance of the country before they implement the AI?
I see.
AI,
I see. So the thing is, many of the technologies are, if you look at the law and the clauses in the law are actually can be seen as legal because they have introduced, for example, I mean, with mobile phone data extraction, right? That's so intrusive and you shouldn't be able to do it. But once they had the idea of doing it, they've introduced this clause to gather data carriers from all applicants if they didn't have valid IDs. So once state authorities have an idea around using a technology, it's actually not that difficult to change the law with those minor clauses, especially if it doesn't have to go through the parliament. So many of them, I mean, I haven't gone into detail for each, but many of them are legal on paper. But then how they are used, obviously, whether it's necessary, whether it's proportional, whether there's any consent at all, any meaningful consent at all, then you see lots of different difficulties. So I know I'm past the time, so please do email me with your questions. I'm more than happy to spend the rest of the next few hours to respond.
All right.
That's okay.
Thank you. Would you like to? There's one final question here from the for our classroom. Just
Sure.
one final question, please.
I'll take it.
And then
Hello. Can you hear?
Yes. It's muted again.
Thank you for your presentation. And my question it concerns when we talked about how AI could in the future and maybe even now use the clusters to make the decisions. And in this sense, maybe the biases are revealed. And we said that the decision makers, they already were driven by these biases, and now it's become transparent. And I know that many people look at it in a negative way, but I was wondering if we could see it from a bit of an optimistic perspective, in a sense that if AI helps us to see these things, we actually know that there are biases now because we have some kind of understanding of the way that the algorithms are working, right? And maybe I was just wondering what could be done in order to avoid this. So maybe as a contra AI, or, I was just thinking that if this could be a optimistic ground to come up with new technology, new way that would help us to use individual assessment and maybe to avoid those biases, because once the decisions are made by humans and we don't know what's going on, then it's pretty hard to prove that the bias exists.
Yeah.
So maybe this could be a good...
so just want to add on that. So it is transparent. So I just want to clarify, it is transparent only if it's a rule-based system. So only if the algorithm is like, goes through stages, and if it's a yes or no question, and then it is very clear how the decision is made, right? So if in the UK case, for example, the triage system was specifically using a multi-stage process, and you could see each process and how the decision was made. However, if there is machine learning involved, and if it's an unsupervised machine learning, then we don't have transparency. Then there's a huge loss of transparency gets lost. So it is the type of technology that is used. It's only if it's the rule-based, very much simple rule-based algorithm, then we can figure out that, yes, but you were actually, disqualifying certain nationalities here. Whereas with the other one, the risk is being calculated constantly in real time. So it is actually not that transparent at all. So it may make it even worse. But you're right. I mean, it is that rule-based system is definitely more more clear to detect and show as opposed to human caseworkers making a decision.
Thank you.
Yeah. Please do share my email address, Francesco, if I don't know if you don't have, and yeah, I'll wait for emails.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you really again for your presentation. I think we really couldn't wish for a better start or a better introduction of our summer school today. So thank you really very much. Students have noted your email in case of further questions, observations. So if you're further interested, don't hesitate to email Derya. Thank you very much once again. It was a pleasure. And let's now have a very quick break, and then we have the following lecture. All right. Thank you very much again, Derya.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Many thanks, Derya. Many thanks.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks for staying alert.
Thank you,
See you soon.
Derya.
Bye.
Okay. I don't know whether Matthias is already here with us. Let's check our next guest.
Yes, Francesco Mattia has just been admitted, so he is with us.
Yeah, okay, great. So let's see if everything works correctly, audio, video. Matthias, can you hear us? Can you see us?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
All
well.
right. Okay, welcome.
Good morning.
Hello,
How's everyone
welcome.
doing?
All right. Okay, so let's now turn to our second lecture today. We have Matthias Leese here with us for the second part of the first topic of the day. Matthias Leese is assistant professor of technology and governance at Department of Humanities, Social Political Science at the ATH in Zurich. His research is focusing on the effects of digital technologies on social order, with a specific focus and attention to security organizations, their rationales and practices that are constituted between the technological and the social. Matthias is going to talk us about EU border controls and procedures, accessibility of information, and data quality issues. Matthias, thank you very much again for being here with us, and the floor is yours.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for the kind introduction. Just to briefly clarify, how long do you expect me to speak approximately?
So you have 90 minutes basically until 1 o'clock.
Right.
That will be the program. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I mean, I would suggest that I speak a little less than 80 minutes, and we have the opportunity for a Q&A afterward.
Yeah.
Would that be in your interest?
Sure.
Because I think just me speaking to everyone would be kind of boring. So
okay.
I would suggest to make it a bit more interactive, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. We can have a debate. We can collect questions, observations, both
Wonderful.
from the audience here in Italy and people connecting online on Zoom. So sure, definitely.
Wonderful. So in that case, I will share my screen. Now I've got to pick the right one. I'm operating with two screens here, and usually when I share, it's always the wrong one. So let's try that. Okay, you probably don't see the presentation now, do you?
Yes, we can see your screen, but not the presentation.
Yeah, so it's the wrong one again. So let's try that again. So here we go. Now this should
all right.
This should work, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Wonderful. So yeah, again, hi everyone. I hope you had a good morning session already. And so as far as I'm concerned, probably the thing that stands between you and lunch. So let's try to make this at least as interesting as possible. So what I intend to speak about today is the question of how data are mobilized for the regulation of security and mobility, particularly in the case of the European Union, which is the geographical area that I've been doing most of my research on. And so I will try to walk you through two different case studies and then try to kind of connect the larger themes and try to theorize that a bit. So that best case scenario at the end of the lecture, we will all have a slightly better understanding of the kind of imaginaries of data and data practices and how those are supposed to be turned into security relevant information and actionable intelligence. Right. So let's start with a couple thoughts on theory. so security and mobility, why should we be thinking about those two in an intertwined fashion? I think for me and many others, the work of Michel Foucault, famous French philosopher / historian, has been very instructive in that sense. Foucault has already back in the 1970s extensively thought about how states regulate, different issues from mental health, sexuality, to security issues. And in this regard, particularly instructive are his lectures that he gave at the Collège de France in Paris in the academic year of 1977 and 78, where he thinks about questions pertaining to security, territory, and population. Right. So for him, the main guiding question of his theory or his inquiries were how states have historically been dealing with the question how to secure their territory and how this relates to the population that lives within that territory. And there he develops the idea that mobility is an ambiguous concept, right? So on the one hand, mobility is of course absolutely necessary because it is what connects people across borders. It is what helps forge common identities. And most of all, it is very important for the economy, right? So goods, services, people, ideas, they need to be on the move in order to create surplus value. But mobility is also bad, right? Because with that mobility, there also comes the possibility of threat, right? So not only good things travel and cross borders, but also, weapons, trafficked humans, contraband, etc., etc. Right, and so for him, historically, he retraces how state authorities have reacted to that ambiguous makeup of mobility, and he kind of shows us how states have been trying to find ways to enable good mobility while at the same time shutting down bad mobility. Right, and this of course backs two questions. The first one being, how does one define good and bad mobility? And the second one being how to then put that into practice. I mean, how to sort and sift flows of goods, of people, etc. Right. So we're essentially dealing with the question of sorting, of assessment and sorting. And this then brings us to the second larger kind of framework theme that we need to think about today. And this could be data, right? So data, I think, have been discussed kind of extensively over the past decades. I think there is a bit of a common theme. I mean, I would call it a data hype, and that data hype revolves around that business model that, when you have data and you have algorithms, then you can actually create surplus value from the data that you're analyzing. Right. And then, if you have more data and even better algorithms, like, when you think about big data and artificial intelligence applications, then the idea is that, this creates even more surplus value. And the question, of course, is how do you define surplus value? This would, I think, be in relation to specific domains or use cases. So, for instance, in research, in academia, the surplus value would be defined as the novel insights into how the world works. So if we have large amounts of research data that we analyze, using sophisticated means of analysis, then, this will give us, better theories, better concepts, and so on. In the economy, I think it's quite clear. It's increased revenue that you can generate, for instance, through targeted advertising or other custom-tailored services. Right, so the idea here would be to use data to identify customer preferences or customer needs, and then either advertise your products in a kind of more directed fashion, or adjust the products or services that you want to sell in the first place. If you think about healthcare, I think this is another kind of very prominent domain where people have been thinking about data. Here it comes with the promise of improved diagnostics, individual monitoring and treatment. So if you think about hospitals, data can give you better insights into what patients actually need and how to provide those needed services to them. Then, more broadly speaking, in the realm of governance, we have this idea of a more accurate interface between the government and citizens. So, for instance, for taxation or land ownership or voter registration and other public records. Here, the idea would be that if you have better data, more data, better means of analyzing the data, this would actually give you a more targeted approach where you can deliver services to the population in a more custom-tailored and more accurate fashion. And this would then also kind of pave ways into more effective public policy designs. Last but not least, and this is the context that is going to be most relevant for us today here, is international security or national security, depends on the kind of level of analysis that you want to look at. And here, of course, the idea is to use data for purposes of threat assessment and prevention. Right, so this is where it ties back into Foucault's concept of biopolitics, where he essentially thought about how information about mobile populations can be assembled and how that information can then be analyzed in order to make that distinction between the good mobilities and the bad mobilities. Right, so the good ones that you want to enable and the bad ones that you want to disable. Okay, so much for some theoretical thoughts up front. Now let's go into the first case study. And this case study, I think, illustrates quite well how this idea of gathering information, assessing information, and then coming to judgments about different people on the move plays out in practice. And so this is a study that I've been carrying out together with my colleague Yorgos Gluftsios from the University of Trento here in Italy. I mean, actually not here, but where you are in Italy. And so Yorgos and I have been thinking about PNR data for quite a bit. And we then decided to engage with those actors, the passenger information units at the national level that actually analyze PNR data. And we were driven by the question how air travel data in the European Union are actually turned into intelligence for the fight against serious crime and terrorism. Yeah, some of the results from the study have been recently published in the Review of International Studies. You can see the abstract of the paper here. So let's first of all start with the PNR directive, right? So PNR, passenger name record. You've probably heard about this at some point. It has been a political topic for many years. Especially, I think, after 9/11, the idea of PNR data being data input for the assessment of international mobility for security purposes has been very high on the political agenda. And so over the years, there were still some roadblocks that needed to be resolved in order to make PNR data really workable in international security contexts. But the European Union has then finally, in 2016, adopted a directive for the use of passenger name record information for the prevention, detection, investigation, and prosecution of terrorist offenses and serious crime. Right, what does that mean? EU regulations need to be translated into national law in each EU member state. Right, so the EU basically says, okay, look, this is the framework. And now the member states have to do the implementation that corresponds with their national legal frameworks. But the main rationale here is to use commercial aviation data to identify and prevent security risks. Now, the first question that you probably have is, what are PNR data? PNR data, all of you probably have at some point in your life created a PNR record. A PNR record is simply kind of triggered when you book a flight. Then the airline collects a number of data items. I think in total it's 26 data items. Here on the left, you can see 19 of them. And these data items are primarily created for customer management purposes, right? So they contain your name, your travel route, when you booked your ticket, how you paid for your ticket, your contact information, your payment information, your flight route, whether you went through a travel agency, your travel status, whether you're a member of a frequent flyer program, that kind of stuff. Whether you travel with baggage. So essentially everything that the airline needs to give you the best, kind of most convenient air travel experience, right? So essentially they need to make sure that, your seat isn't double booked, that you get the in-flight meal that you ordered, all these kinds of things. And so PNR data have essentially always been, or at least for a long time, been collected by airlines. And now the PNR directive obliges these air carriers to transmit all of their PNR records that they created automatically through online booking to state authorities. A day or two, so 24 to 48 hours before the departure of the actual flight. What does that mean? So for what are they analyzed? What you can see here on the left is the full list of offenses that PNR can be used to model and then analyze international mobility. So you see that it is essentially a whole mixed bag of major offenses, right? So we're talking about terrorism and international serious international crime here. So it goes really from being a member of a criminal organization to trafficking, sexual exploitation, contraband, weapon smuggling, corruption, fraud, money laundering, counterfeiting products, rape, sabotage. So a whole list of, kind of very, very major criminal and terrorist offenses. And the idea behind the PNR directive is that the PNR data that are submitted to state authorities could in one way or another be used to actually look for people who might be implicated in one of these offenses, right? So the rationale here is that you use those data points that air carriers submit to state authorities, and then look for patterns in international travel behavior that could hint at one of these offenses, and then you could actually intervene into the travel behavior of people. You could kind of do something before the actual crime happens, or you can actually intervene, put people into under surveillance in order to kind of uncover criminal networks, and so on and so on. Now the next question is, how is this done, right? The PNR directive foresees different ways of analyzing PNR data. I think the most important and most pertinent and most frequently used one is the creation of so-called targeting rules. So these targeting rules would, like I said before, model travel behavior that is believed to be suspicious. As soon as you have a targeting rule, which is like a model, like a profile that you look for in the data, then you can screen the PNR data for any passengers in the entire kind of aerial mobility in the European Union that would potentially match those targeting rules, and you could then intervene into their activities. Next question is, who actually does that? So I said before that we looked at passenger information units. So passenger information units, or PIUs, either national police or intelligence units that have been set up after the adoption of the 2016 EU directive in each EU member state. And they are the ones who actually work with PNR data on a daily basis. Right, so in that sense, what they do is I would say, very central element in how security and mobility are enacted in practice in everyday activities in the EU. And so their work, although they are relatively unknown, I believe is a key facet of how security and mobility are being regulated and targeted politically. Next question, how did we study the work of PIUs? Right, so essentially, field access to security actors, security authorities is notoriously difficult, right? So they are often reluctant to speak with academics. They are often, I would say, kind of concerned that knowledge about their working practices would, put criminals or terrorists in a situation where they could game the system, where they could use that information to their advantage. They are also often concerned that academics might potentially reveal infringements of civil liberties or human rights, and especially when we speak about profiling. I think this is a very sensitive issue area. So for all these reasons, security organizations are often not willing to speak with academics. So in order to really understand what PIUs are doing and how they are analyzing PNR data, we had to become a bit creative. So essentially, we put in requests for interviews with several European passenger information units. In the end, most of them declined to speak with us for the aforementioned reasons. We got access to 3 of them. So we were able to carry out semi-structured expert interviews with technicians, with analysts, with supervisors, with people on the strategic level. But this was, of course, a very small sample, right? It was only 3 passenger information units. So we decided to additionally talk to EU representatives who had been involved in policymaking processes around the PNR directive. And we also got the opportunity to talk with industry representatives who were involved in the implementation of PIU systems at the national level. So this gave us kind of the first pillar of first-hand experiences, of first-hand professional thoughts about the usefulness of PNR data and the ways in which PNR data can actually be analyzed in a meaningful way. But like I said, this was a kind of a small sample. And so we decided to triangulate, which means you employ different research methods, different methodologies to explore the same subject area from different perspectives, which gives you, in the best case scenario, a more complete outlook on the thematic. So as a second pillar, we decided to use data from webinars. Right? We had been participating in webinars that were organized by the law enforcement and border control community, mostly targeting the community itself. But as those seminars or webinars were open for externals as well, we used that as an information source to get some kind of a different perspective on how people, how professionals think about what they are doing and how they discuss it amongst each other. Then as a third pillar of research data, we were actually able to access the CPOL online training, what is it, a platform essentially. It's usually only for members of law enforcement, but we were able to negotiate access with essentially the people that decide whether you are eligible for access on that platform or not. And so we got the opportunity to create an account, and they have training programs on all kinds of different matters of law enforcement and border control collaboration in Europe. And so we were able to complete the entire CPOL training course for PNR data. I should, by the way, have said that CPOL is the European Union agency for law enforcement training. So they are concerned with the harmonization of training for law enforcement officers and border control officers in the European Union. So this was the third pillar. And then as a fourth pillar, we decided that we would also analyze documents. So we looked at the legal frameworks, we looked at the policy-making processes surrounding PNR data. So not only the official legal documents, but also the working papers, the white papers, the technical annexes, the feasibility studies, and so on and so on. And so all of this, I believe, has put us in a perspective where we got a kind of a coherent picture on the work of passenger information units. And so there was a very large research data corpus that has been resulting from these four pillars. And we decided to methodically use an inductive way of coding. So the idea here is that in order to find cross-cutting themes, in a large composition of different documents, interview transcripts, webinar material, and so on, you would go through the material in an in vivo fashion, and then you would kind of go through it paragraph by paragraph. And then, if one paragraph talked about one particular issue, then you would generate a code category from that issue. And then, as you progress through the material, code categories are usually refined, they are merged. And so as you go through the material multiple times, you usually get a quite good understanding of, the most important cross-cutting issues, the most important cross-cutting categories through all of these documents. And so we were able to thematically cluster these categories, and this was then the scaffolding, if you will, that informed the empirical analysis and the kind of the distinct set of data practices that I will talk about now. So first of all, we found that a good deal of the activities of PIUs consist of cleaning data. Right? I mean, this at first I think sounds a bit strange, maybe, because you would kind of assume that PNR data come ready to be analyzed, but we found that this is actually not the case. So there really is a lot of concern about the reliability, the trustworthiness, the completeness, the accuracy, and so on of the PNR data records that are being transmitted by the commercial air carriers. So as you can see here on the left, I put some quotes on that slide. So for instance, one interviewee told us that sometimes you get a Mr. Extra seat who appears to be flying on 70 flights simultaneously, because the system, when you book an extra seat, because you don't want to sit next to another person, you can book another seat. And so in the booking system, those seats will be assigned to a first name extra, last name seat. And so it appears that you have the same person traveling on many different flights at the same time. Or you have that issue with document numbers, with passport numbers, where you would go to the counter and buy your ticket, and if you're in a hurry as a customer, then the person at the counter just types in a made-up passport number in order to speed up the process. So this results in fake passport numbers, and this is apparently kind of a big deal, because from the perspective of PIU, you of course want to have the right passport number. You want to be able to unanimously identify a person. And so that's an issue. The second quote here comes from an analyst who told us that they were really struggling with different dimensions of data quality in PNR data. So he talks about the ways in which they have over time learned to flag potential issues, kind of do automated assessment of certain data categories, and then just find entries that do not seem intuitively true, and to flag them. Right. So for instance, he says here a sequential number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? That's not a passport number. It could be a passport number, but it's highly likely that it's not a passport number. Right. So they flag those. And then they, of course, exchange information and experiences with all of the other passenger information units in other countries. And so they come up with this kind of sophisticated system of flagging suspicious data and then removing those data, or validating those data if possible, otherwise removing those data from the actual PNR record set. So in a sense, I think what happens here, conceptually speaking, there has been a lot of stuff written about data friction, and we will go back to that later on. But essentially what is happening here is that there is a mismatch between data quality requirements, as in the use case of commercial air travel, and the security work that is relevant for international or national security that is carried out by PIUs. Right. So in customer management, it is, I think, in most cases okay if you don't get a correct passport number, right? Because a correct passport number does not really interfere with customer management, customer care. It does not really interfere with your kind of travel convenience as a customer. But in international security, of course, this becomes a problem because like I said, you are no longer able to unanimously identify people, and so you lose that sense of accuracy that you want to have as a security organization. So for PIUs, what this meant was that they needed to come up with very sophisticated quality control schemes, quality control processes. And I mean, essentially, this is what they would consider the most important, or one of the most important tasks that they have to deal with on a daily basis, is to really sort out the reliability and the trustworthiness of data. Right. So they are really, to a large extent of their time that they work with the data, they are concerned with data cleaning. Then the second theme or finding that we put forward in the article is contextualization of data. Right. So in order to really be able to meaningfully match PNR data and possible patterns in the PNR data and aero mobility as an ecosystem, people told us that it is extremely important that you have domain knowledge, that you have experience and expertise as to what air travel usually looks like, what its characteristics are, and how these characteristics actually then interact with data that you have about air travel behavior of individuals. So for instance, one person told us that you need to get a good feeling about the average weight of luggage, right? So I mean, what you want to do essentially is you want to look for deviations from the norm, right? So any deviations are considered potentially suspicious. I'm really sorry, the daycare, my son's daycare is calling. I need to take this real quick. I'll be right back. Hey, Susan. Hi, Colin. Ja. Super. Also er hat durchgeschlafen, hat einmal getrunken und ansonsten war er super drauf. Okay.
So, shall we, Matthias, shall we have a round of questions or comments?
Okay.
We can't hear you.
Ja, es ist halt einfach so, das ist ja.
We can't hear you anymore, Matthias.
I'm sorry, Professor. He's taking a phone call. He's answering a phone call from the daycare.
No, we can't hear you.
Can you hear us? He had to answer a phone call.
Okay.
I'm terribly sorry. I'm back. Yeah.
All right, no problem at all. Okay.
Yeah, my son has a fever, and
Yeah.
to pick him up from daycare, but I told him that I'm gonna finish this here first, and
okay.
So,
Don't worry, no problem at all.
yeah, really sorry for the
can,
interruption.
Don't worry, we can continue then, right?
Okay, perfect. So where was I? Yes, so you need to have expertise about the international aviation system, because if you want to look for deviations from the norm, then you need to actually have to know what the norm looks like. And so, yeah, like this person told us, there are certain regularities that you just need to familiarize yourself with. So, for instance, that there's different flight routes in summer and in winter. You often have different standard customers for different periods of the day. So on the morning flights, it's usually business people. Then on the midday flights, it's often tourists, etc., etc. And they also told us that in order to match kind of suspicious travel behavior with PNR data, they also get a lot of information from local authorities, right? So as this other person told us, the best information source for them is their colleagues who are based, in a particular place where there might be a trafficking network, right? And so they need those local authorities to tell them about the modus operandi of that trafficking network, right? They need them to tell them about, specific kind of specific flight routes, specific, groups of people that might be traveling together, and so on and so on. So in a sense, this speaks a lot to the importance of not only domain expertise, but also traditional police investigations that play a huge role in the ways in which PNR data are analyzed. So kind of interestingly, as opposed to ideas of, big data analytics, where you just would have an algorithm to, scan PNR data and come up with some kind of pattern recognition. This is not actually what people are doing in practice. What they're doing is really to rely on local knowledge, to build a model, to build a profile that corresponds with the knowledge that comes from local authorities, and then use that profile to screen incoming PNR data. Right. The third theme of findings is adjustment. And this, I think, is one thing that took us quite by surprise. I mean, it makes a lot of sense if you think about it, but we were not expecting to find such a level of tinkering in the work of PIUs. So essentially what adjustment means is that security interventions have to correspond with the air travel ecosystem, right? So what the first person here told us is that they cannot and should not create profiles that will lead to an excessive number of hits, right? So he tells us that, you cannot arrest 40 people, send them to the medical center for x-rays to see their stomach, because in 90% of the cases, you will not actually find anything. So what you're going to do in that situation? You're going to say that you're sorry, and, the person missed their plane. Very sorry that you couldn't go to your meeting or your conference. So this, I think, speaks to a couple different levels here. So first of all, it is operational capacities on the ground. So, right, security actors do not have unlimited resources that they can devote to interventions into air travel. But it also means that kind of they need to protect individual rights. Right? So I mean, they can't just act on any potential hit, and then a lot of those are going to be false positives, and so this infringes with individual rights of people, right? So you can't just on a hunch keep someone from flying and maybe, I don't know, missing a funeral or an important business meeting or whatever. And then in the end, I think, and this is what the second quote here speaks about, it also creates problems for the airlines. And so, I mean, he says here, if you delay a plane for security reasons, nobody was arrested or nobody was found with explosives or drugs, then this is going to be costing a lot of people a lot of money, right? So it may create a mess for the airline. The crew might need to change because, waiting times and working hours and other regulations. And so, another crew needs to come in, and maybe the plane needs to be refueled, more delays going to be added. And so it is also a question of economics, right? And I think all these aspects taken together really speak to the fact that PIUs do tinker with these profiles. They adjust them in correspondence with the actual hits that they produce to artificially bring the number of hits down. Right, so I think one person once told us that you want to have about 2 or 3 hits per plane, per flight. So this is something that they can reasonably work with. Anything more or less would kind of not be an optimal situation, or not be considered kind of optimal. And so I think in the end, this really shows us how data practices matter quite a bit in how international security is being produced through digital data. All these themes that we've been talking about, all these data cleaning processes, data contextualization processes, adjustment processes throughout the analysis process. All these practices have really an influence on how data, come to paint a particular picture of international security, and then also offer possibilities for the regulation of mobility. And so, I mean, if we think about practices from a conceptual point of view, then Schatzky has this famous definition as embodied, materially mediated arrays of human activities centrally organized around shared practical understanding. So that means that you do things in a way that is kind of intuitive, and there might be a common sense for certain practices among your community. In this particular case, law enforcement and border control community. And so this might actually be kind of different from the high-level regulations that we find in law and policy. Right? And I think this is why it is so important to look into practices and really see, in the words of Foucault, how mobile populations are sorted and sifted, to really see, how the bad guys are being separated from the good guys and being kind of stopped and intervened into. They can be detained, they can be questioned, they can be put under surveillance. I mean, never mind what actual intervention mechanisms you put into place. The important thing here is that data play a huge role in the analysis of mobility flows in the international system. So flights in the Schengen area, flights going out of Schengen into Schengen, all those flights, all those mobilities produce data, and those data can then be analyzed and used to kind of produce very, very concrete threat assessments. And these threat assessments can then be turned into interventions, right? And I think this is why kind of Foucault is such an important theoretical source for people who are dealing, with international mobility, international security, and the intertwinement of these phenomena and their regulation that is being increasingly done through digital data. Okay, so much for interim conclusions. Let's take things a little step further. So what you see here, I mean, I don't suppose anyone recognizes this graphic. It is actually one of the few official visualizations of the database architecture that we have in the European Union for justice and home affairs. I think this comes from a 2017 staff working document on interoperability. And so all these databases that are being depicted here are essentially the knowledge infrastructure that we have in the European Union for information, not only about people who fly, but about people who cross borders, people who commit crimes, people who apply for asylum. So essentially anything that would fall under this broad scope of internal security or justice and home affairs, as it is called in official European Union language. So on the right-hand side, you have several European level databases that are run and managed by Leese, the agency for the management of large-scale databases in the EU. So the EES is the entry exit system, which is a future system that is currently undergoing implementation that will be systematically recording entries and exits into and out of the Schengen area. So essentially a digital repository of movement into Schengen and out of Schengen. Then ETIAS is the European Travel Information Authorization System, which is, I think, essentially a copycat version of ESTA. So, when you travel to the US, you have to get pre-travel authorization. And so ETIAS will do the same thing for the Schengen area. You have the Visa Information System, the VIS, which is an information sharing system for the application of asylum sorry, not asylum, for visa. So this is, among other things, used to prevent so-called visa shopping, where people apply for Schengen visas in different states, trying to maximize their chances. So this is where all the information on visa applications is being exchanged. You have the Eurodac, which is the European asylum fingerprint database. So this one is specifically geared towards asylum, and it primarily stores biometrics that make it possible to identify asylum seekers, even when they don't hold any official passport documents or other documentation. And then you have the so-called ACRIS TCN, which is the European Criminal Records Information System for third country nationals. So this is a database that holds information about any convictions by third country nationals that travel into the Schengen area. And then on the left-hand side, you have some more systems. You have the SIS, the Schengen Information System, which is actually the oldest and largest and also most frequently used information system in the Schengen area. Contains information about a whole array of things, actually. So it's both about people and objects. So on the object side, it has information about counterfeit documents, stolen documents, stolen passports, stolen vehicles, forged license plates. I mean, essentially anything that comes to mind when you think about law enforcement and border control cooperation, and objects that might be relevant for these areas. And then on the people side of things, it contains entries about people who might be wanted for arrest, or who might be wanted for judicial assistance in court, or people who have been reported missing, or children who have been reported as abducted by their parents, or one parent. So essentially, it is a large host of different alert categories for both objects and people. And then even further on the left-hand side, you still have Interpol and Europol. So these are the European and the international police cooperation organizations that also store data on criminal records or crime-related matters, broadly speaking. All these systems are in the future to be made interoperable, right? So this is what's being depicted here by 4 elements. So we have a unified search portal that should in the future enable European authorities to conduct searches either on alphanumeric data, so for instance, biographic data or passport numbers or document numbers, or on biometric data. So, could also be facial images, could be fingerprints or other biometrics. And so there's supposed to be a European single search portal in the future that will enable you to run search queries on all of the systems simultaneously, giving you, information on whether there's a hit in one of these systems or not. And then there's, several technical elements. There's common identity repository, a multiple identity detector, and a shared biometric matching system. I think I will not go into those in detail, but there are technical elements that are going to be used to, or that are supposed to be used in the future to make all these systems speak to each other on a technical level. Now the question, or the problem with all of these databases, so essentially, all the kind of information and intelligence on, mobility, border crossing, security, etc., in the EU are based on one or multiple of these systems. And now the problem is, as these systems have been growing kind of exponentially in the past, both in number, in content, in scope, in capacity, the Council in 2016 actually kind of took inventory of the data that are stored in these systems and came to the conclusion that the quality, at least in some instances, could be improved. Right? They write here in this 2016 communication that some of the issues that they encountered include inappropriate use of data fields, data inconsistencies, incorrect formats, missing data, poor quality biometric samples, etc., etc. So in many ways, what they are saying here is that the data that we have in all these, high-level information systems that are being used for the production and maintenance of political order in the Schengen area, they're not really trustworthy, they're not really reliable. And so what we are currently seeing, or let's take a step back and think about why this would be the case in the first place. Right, so if you think about how data end up in EU-level information systems, then you have to think about where these data come from. Data are usually produced at the local level. They are then aggregated to the either regional level or directly to the national level, and then from the national level they go into EU-level systems. That means data journey quite a bit. So Sabina Leonelli and colleagues have coined that concept of the data journey, where essentially they say that data are very powerful because they can be shared, they can travel across institutional contexts, they can travel across temporal contexts, cultural boundaries, different geographical contexts. So this is essentially what makes data very powerful, because they can be used and repurposed in different contexts. But this also means that usually whenever data travel from one context to another, and here we go back to Edwards and this idea of data friction, they usually kind of create some trouble, right? So we have seen before in the case of PNR data that different use cases, commercial aviation and national security, international security, have very different data quality requirements. And so, there is this tension, and a lot of resources, a lot of effort needs to be put into resolving these data frictions that are being created by the journeys of data. And so I think this is kind of, when we think about it conceptually, this is the main reason why data in EU-level database systems are considered unreliable to such an extent. And now we can look at the question, what does that mean? Right? So trustworthiness, as Rob Kitchen, famous geographer who has worked on data issues for quite a long time and has written many smart things about data. He says essentially, what data and the interaction and use of data, what it breaks down to in many ways is the question of trustworthiness. Like he says, do we believe in the integrity of a data set to tell us something meaningful about the world? If yes, great. Then this data set can give us novel insights into how the world works, and it give us new possibilities to kind of regulate the world and intervene into the world and shape it in the way that we actually want it to be. But if not, then all this crumbles. If you think back to the beginning of the lecture, when we spoke about the data business model and all these different kinds of domains where data are supposed to bring all these new possibilities, all these advantages. But if we don't trust the data, if we don't believe that they are kind of telling us something meaningful, then all these promises do kind of instantly crumble. And so it is super important, as the Council has noted itself in 2016, to actually be able to be in a situation where we can trust data. So, I mean, I put this definition of data quality here. I mean, there's many different ones, but essentially, data quality is the question: do the data refer to the degree of fulfillment of all those requirements defined for them, which is needed for a specific purpose? Now, this sounds very complicated, but it essentially means that for a specific use case, you make use case definitions and data quality requirements in relation to that use case, and then you kind of see whether the data that you have at your disposal, whether they actually meet those criteria or whether they don't. Again, if you think back of the data quality requirements that commercial airlines have in regard to their PNR data, and the data quality requirements that PIUs have in regard to the PNR data that they get from the from the airlines. The data quality specifications here are very much different, and this is what creates trouble. So usually what you have is some kind of data governance framework that defines how data are supposed to be managed, how they are supposed to be handled, and how they are supposed to be embedded into organizations. Right, so Janssen et al., they define data governance as the pattern of rules and authorities for directing the proper functioning of and ensuring the accountability for the entire lifecycle of data and algorithms within and across organizations. So this essentially means that usually you have people who are, designated data quality officers. You have workflows and processes in place that ensure that data are kind of treated in a standardized way, that there are harmonized processes and workflows across different divisions of an organization, et cetera, et cetera. That metadata are being created so that people can actually kind of intersubjectively assess whether data are trustworthy or not. So this is usually the kind of framework that ensures that the data quality is being put into practice within organizations. Now, if we go back to the problem of the European Union Justice and Home Affairs area and the untrustworthiness of the data in the databases for the regulation of security and mobility, then interestingly, we can see two different political approaches how to address this issue. The first approach here comes from the Commission, which has in 2021 adopted a so-called implementing regulation. It's actually two of them because we still have different legal grounds for border control and criminal cooperation in the European Union. So what these implementing regulations essentially say is that the Commission wants to check the data that member states submit to EU level systems. How is this done? So essentially what they say is, look, we need a classification system where we assess the data that are being transmitted by national level authorities. And by means of a number of metrics, we sort them into different categories, right? And they here come up with three different categories. The first one essentially being, good, which means that the input data profile complies with the data quality indicators, and it goes straight into the EU level system. The second category, low quality, means that there might be some issues, but still the data will go into the EU level system, but it will be flagged, right? So when a search query then eventually, brings up data that are supposed to be low quality, that are regarded to be low quality, then the user will get kind of contextual information that, look, I mean, these data might not be fully reliable, so please, try to cross-validate or find other information sources to kind of give you a more coherent picture. And then they have a third category, and I think this is very interesting. They kind of say, look, when we have data that do not at all comply with our proposed standards, then they can't become a part of EU level systems in the first place, right? They're being rejected. They're kind of bounced back to the member states, where they then need to be kind of quality checked again, and then kind of might get in the second round, but not in the first round. So what does that mean? If we go back to this little schematic here, what essentially is being targeted is this level, right? So it's the data that are being transmitted from the national databases to EU level databases. And what the classification system does is it establishes a barrier, right? It is a flexible barrier that either opens up or closes down in accordance with the assessment metrics that puts the data into one of these three categories. So what does that mean? What does making data trustworthy in this context mean? So first of all, you have this kind of a flexible entry regulation that works through a very narrow focus on the data themselves, right? So trust is here operationalized in a way that works through metrics, predefined metrics, standardized a standardized set of assessment tools that will give you an objective, in air quotes, assessment of the data that are being transmitted. What is not taken into consideration is the context of data production and data management. So in a sense, the idea of trust here becomes completely detached and decontextualized from the larger socio-technical surroundings of data, right? So usually when you think about data quality, we talked about data governance before, you have all these rules, all these processes, all these roles and responsibilities. You have metadata, you look at kind of the practices and so on, and all this then brings you to the conclusion of whether you trust your data or not. Here the complete opposite is happening, right? Here all this is kind of bracketed out, and the Commission really only focuses on the data themselves. And so I think this is really kind of interesting to see how data here become detached from everything that goes on around them. There is a second approach politically at the moment, and this has been put forward by the Council, more specifically the Justice and Home Affairs Council. So these are essentially the ministers of the interior of all EU member states that meet, I think, every 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, and discuss matters related to internal security in the European Union. And so in 2020, kind of following up on the earlier Council statement of 2016, they decided to establish what they call a roadmap for standardization of data quality purposes. So what they've been doing is they gave a mandate to the ICSIM working party, which is the Justice and Home Affairs Information Exchange Working Party in the Council. And they told them, look, what we need to do is we need to find ways to improve data quality from the bottom up, right? And so what this data quality roadmap includes is essentially 3, or you could also say 4 categories or 4 levels. So the first of them pertains to data quality for alphanumeric and biometric data. Actually, those two are kind of heavily separated when it comes to the actual implementation, because alphanumeric data and biometric data are very different categories of data. They require different processes, different approaches to ensuring quality, although they are in practice, of course, kind of usually used together, right? So for an identity record, you usually have a biometric as an anchor, for instance, an iris template or a facial image template or a fingerprint template. And to that template is then alphanumeric data added, for instance, in the form of biographic information, of additional intelligence and investigative knowledge. And this then creates the personal record that makes you as an individual identifiable and knowledgeable, and also subject to regulation and intervention. So in practice, these two are usually used together. For the more technical approach of data quality that is being pursued here by the roadmap, they are being treated as separate categories. On the second level, the roadmap foresees the creation of a reference catalog of devices and solutions. So that essentially means that the technical equipment that is used to create data is supposed to be harmonized across all the EU member states, across all the local contexts where data are being produced, I think this is particularly pertinent for the production of biometrics. So if you think about, for instance, I know some small Greek island where people in the Mediterranean arrive by boat. They are being registered and enrolled at a hotspot camp or whatever. And so usually the equipment that they have in these remote places for capturing fingerprints are not really kind of the latest and best ones. So that means that, you know, the quality of biometric templates often does suffer and does not really adhere to international standards. And so this is, I think, one of the most kind of pertinent areas where this harmonization of technical solutions is supposed to help. And then as a fourth level, they want to regulate cybersecurity in the sense that they want to make sure that, you know, all the local and national databases are really kind of secure in the sense of information security, so that, you know, no one without legitimate authority can actually enter the system. So, you know, as a protection against hackers, essentially. Now, if we go back to our scheme, then what is being addressed politically here is, of course, something very different. So essentially, this is what's being targeted here, right? And the idea here is that if we can render all the local and national databases trusted in the first place through standardization and harmonization, then we wouldn't have to concern ourselves with the data that are being transmitted to EU level systems any longer, right? So whereas the Commission's approach kind of comes top down and is very technical and decontextualized, here you have the bottom up approach that is very very broad, very involves a lot of different actors, kind of tries to do a lot of things at the same time, right? So we've seen alphanumeric biometric data, technical inventory, and then also the information security of all those systems. So the idea is, if you can harmonize all of that, then data will become trustworthy kind of by default. So what's happening here is what I would call a metadata approach. I mean, I'm not 100% happy with that term yet, but I think it works through that level of, you know, information about information. So if you know about all the ways in which data are being created, in which they are, you know, cleaned, managed, handled, and shared, then this will put you in a position where you can actually make an informed decision about their trustworthiness or not. So trust here comes into being not through you know, kind of objective measurements or assessments, but rather through this idea of cross-national harmonization, right? So the Council here, I mean, it kind of has to, you know, in its institutional role in the European Union, because the Council does represent the nation states, the member states, but it does, of course, focus here on the production and management context of data, which, you know, do happen on the national level, you know, locally, regionally, and then nationally. And so what we see here is that how this is supposed to be working is through the standardization and harmonization of practices and equipment. So again, a very, very different regulatory approach, a very different, also, I think, ideological approach, if you will. And so I think it's very interesting to see how these two approaches put forward by the Commission and the Council might either be competing against each other, or you know, maybe in a bit more, you know, benevolent perspective, also complementing each other. Some more conclusions before I come to the end. What we see here, I think, as a cross-cutting theme is that, you know, data are never fixed. So Morgan has them has called them mutable mobiles in a very, very good 2011 book chapter. This idea of mutable mobiles, you know, plays with this idea of immutable mobiles that Latour has been talking about. But essentially, this idea of mutable mobiles means that data can be multiplied and modified, so they mutate in a sense, and these mutations can be multiple, right? So in different ways and in different contexts and different locations, data mutate in different ways. And if we think about this idea of enactment that we discussed before, then this means that depending on those mutations, depending on those practices that make them mutate in specific ways, they will paint different pictures of the world, and they will, bring into being mobility and risk assessment in different ways, which means that interventions will be carried out in different ways according on what the data actually tell us about the world, right? So Leonelli again has thought about this and has said the evidential value of data is not fixed, right? And so I think this is very, very important for us if we think about, how good mobilities are supposed to be separated from bad mobilities, and on which basis this is being done, and how much we actually want to trust those assessments and those kind of differentiated treatments that also come from those assessments. Final slide. What does that all mean? Also in terms of research, I believe that if we really want to understand the ways in which data come to matter, to use another Latourian expression, is we have to look at all these things that I've been talking about in detail and in an empirical fashion, right? So we have to map data journeys. We have to identify and study all the interactions between humans and data that happen along these journeys. And I think we need to do this, at least from, this is my personal take, and also my personal research agenda that I've developed around that insight. I think we need to engage with those professionals who interact with data on a regular basis, right? So we need to understand how those people that deal with data, we need to understand what their rationales are, what their life worlds are, what their kind of, professional contexts look like, in order to understand how they make sense of data. So if you think about that PNR study that I've discussed earlier, the perspectives of those people working in PIUs, I think they are highly pertinent. They are super important in the ways in which PNR data come to regulate international security and mobility. But I think we would not have been capable of unveiling them had we not been able to, speak with those people, had we not been able to explore their life worlds, right? So, speaking to data producers, to data handlers, to IT guys, to analysts, etc., etc. These are, in my opinion, extremely valuable data sources. And in order to kind of, turn them into contributors for research, we need, of course, methods and tools that are suited to explore their everyday practices, right? So we need tools that can allow us to explore interactions, tacit understandings, implicit agreements, essentially, all the things that Schatzky defined as practices earlier. And so, yeah, I mean, we need methods like interviews, focus groups, maybe even more ethnographic methods, such as, observations, be they, kind of participant or non-participant. But I think we need to go out there, and we need to kind of figure out how data are being dealt with in practice, and how they inform what Foucault has kind of deemed as the primary task of the state, which is to sort out mobilities and, kind of assess which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones. And of course, what I've completely bracketed is all the kind of normative discussions around, how data are being mobilized to assess people and what the implications from that are. I think this is probably another lecture that I hope one of my colleagues will give you in the following days. I will stop here. I've realized I've talked way longer than I wanted and than I originally anticipated. I'm sorry for that. Maybe we can still squeeze in a super quick Q&A. But yeah, that's it from my side. Thanks a lot for paying attention, and sorry for the short interruption in between.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matthias, for your presentation. We have a few minutes left now before our lunch break. So yeah, I would have a round of questions. Yeah, so let's start with, I see a few hands up from the audience in Zoom. So who wants to go first? Is Mini? Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Sure. Hello. Thank you very much, Matthias. It was a very insightful presentation. I'm actually I'm struggling a lot with my methodology myself and the various research methods that can be used in such cases. And I wanted your opinion on ethnographic research. I decided to introduce it for my research. For the record, I'm working on different technologies at the border and how they can, again, filter individuals through which processes and their interference with human rights, because I'm also a lawyer and a political scientist. So I was thinking, and I really, really want to introduce ethnographic research, especially since I've been working as a lawyer before in the field of refugee law, let's say. So I found it very, very important to do a research that is, let's say, to represent somehow, anyway, the idea of the people who are actually subjected to these systems. But in practice, I found this to be extremely difficult. I have already taken some interviews because they tend to shift the conversation towards other issues such as pushbacks, and they tend to undermine, let's say, the impact that the technology might have on their journey throughout the borders. So I was wondering if you still think, despite these difficulties, that it is an important method to use, and in which terms, maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Ismini. I mean, this is this is something that has been driven me for a long time. So I mean, I have to say that my own experiences of doing ethnographic research are limited. Back in the day when I was doing my PhD, we had the chance to do I would call it a semi-ethnography at a German airport, where they introduced body scanner technology for the first time. I had a trial run, and we were allowed to accompany the guys that carried out the security checks with the new equipment. So we were allowed to spend multiple days at the checkpoint, just observing the interactions between technology, passengers, and security personnel. And I think for me, it was one of the most instructive experiences. I mean, we took hundreds of pages of field diary entries and observations. And I think for us in that case, it was really key to understanding how social interaction around a new technology would constitute, right? So in the STS sense, how socio-technical relations are being formed in practice, not only in theory, but in practice. And since then, I've taken every opportunity to, I don't know, I mean, I had just recently, we started this new project on data quality, and I had the opportunity to kind of shadow data managers for quite a bit. So they showed me how they work with different databases and what kind of troubles they encounter. So I think it is, I mean, depending on how you want to use that in your analysis, do you want to make it the prime data source, or do you want to make it a complementary data source that can give you a triangulated outlook on the stuff that you're looking at? I mean, if you want to make it the main data source, I think you would probably need to find a way to, I don't know, become part of an organization that you study, do an internship, or, I mean, there's other ways of becoming embedded. But this, of course, requires very good field access, which might be a bit troublesome in the area that you're studying. But it is possible. I mean, people have pulled it off. It's just extremely, extremely complicated, I would say. And it also probably depends a bit on the luck, right? So you've got to be in the right situation at the right time. You got to know the right people and, you know, say the right things. And then, I mean, if it all kind of falls together, then you might just be in a position where you can, you know, use ethnographic data as a prime research data source, which would be amazing. I mean, if you think about, I'm going to stop talking, but, you know, there's actually many great ethnographic studies on security technologies. So I would definitely encourage you to, you know, pursue that approach further.
All right, thank you. So we have one additional question from the audience in Zoom. That's Tatiana. And then maybe another question from the classroom here. So first, Tatiana, if you'd like to pose your question, comments, please go ahead.
Thank you. Without minimizing the importance of data accuracy, I do have difficulty with reducing the problem of border control procedures to just the issue of good quality data. So I was wondering whether you could please discuss it a bit in the context of a more normative paradigm. Thank you.
Yes, I fully agree with you, Tatiana, absolutely. It is just not the research that we are currently doing, right? So, I mean, what we are currently looking at is data practices. Like I said at the end of the lecture, I mean, there is a whole, you know, a gigantic field of normative analysis that are being attached to the question of the data that are being used. Not really my expertise though, right? So, I mean, I can give you my kind of my lay take on this, and my lay take would be, of course, that, you know, it is a socio-technical system where you have a legal framework, you have practices, you have technology, and all these things interact, and they produce particular outcomes, you know, particular regulatory and practical outcomes. And these outcomes might be highly discriminatory. They might be kind of, you know, putting people at a disadvantage due to personal characteristics. And then you would need to, you know, look at your toolbox to analyze these outcomes. It can be an ethical toolbox. It can be a legal toolbox. It can be a policy toolbox. Like, you know, depending on what you're actually interested in. Like, are you interested in kind of the ethical framing of, you know, the legal setup, or the ethical framing of the conduct that people on the ground carry out? Are you interested in, you know, data protection? Are you interested in, you know, legal principles of purpose limitation? I think all these different angles give you tools to deal with this question of the normative repercussions. Again, I'm not an expert here, but I fully, absolutely agree that, you know, this needs to be the next step, right? It's just not our current research agenda. So I would kind of refrain from giving you empirically supported insights here.
All right.
Sense.
All right, thank you. So we have one question from the students here from Italy, let's say. So yes, please, you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you for your presentation. So in the context of travel data and international security, we see that it changed basically after the 9/11 attacks, you know, and for instance, the shoe bomb plot, Richard Rain, you know, and also in the context of the EU with the France and Brussels case in 2015 and 2016, right? Particularly with PNR directive. And my question is this: we see that the directive itself, as it relates to law and ethics, in most countries, you know, doesn't allow the categorization of ethnicity, race, gender, you know, and all of that. But we consistently see that countries in practice circumvent, you know, these parts, right? So my question is, how do we begin to find regulatory frameworks? Because the existing regulatory frameworks are not as sufficient when member states, or particularly in the EU, circumvent, you know, these parts of the PNR. So how do we solve this problem? Do we create a higher level, or do we try to amend the existing regulatory frameworks?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a brilliant question. As you rightly said, I mean, there's so many ways to use proxies, for instance, for origin, or I don't know. You can look at where a person lives in order to draw conclusions about their race and social status, economic status, and so on. So there's, as you say, many ways in which you can circumvent non-discriminatory principles. I think what we as academics can do is we can explicate the practices, right? We can make things that are being done visible, and this visibility, I think, can then trigger public debate. It can trigger accountability mechanisms. It can trigger potential legal reform. I mean, I'm a sociologist, right? I mean, I'm not a policymaker, but again, I mean, quoting Latour for the third time here, making things public, I think is a very pertinent way in which academia can help discuss these things in an empirically supported way, right? So when we do research, I mean, of course, we publish in academic journals, which is kind of more geared towards our peer community. But we can also publish policy papers. We can publish briefs. We can publish reports, and these documents can then be mobilized by NGOs, by civil liberties organizations, in order to push forward their case and push for legal reform, push for accountability, push for oversight, and so on. So I think research is absolutely key in being the first step towards uncovering how certain regulatory frameworks might be sidestepped, might be circumvented. Does that make sense?
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Yes, thank you. One final question. Anyone else here from the room? Yeah, one final question. Thank you.
So I can make one. Sir, thank you for your presentation. In the beginning of your lesson, you mentioned that criminal background and criminal background checks and investigations were taken into consideration when assessing the right of granting access to entrance. And usually criminal legal history and also historians of authoritarianism, they denounced the idea that criminal prosecutions are used against political oppositioners or against minorities. We can see that this is being done nowadays. And I would like to know if there is a possibility of assessing it case by case, or checking out if those criminal procedures were in fact just political prosecution or minority targeted procedures. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's a difficult one, definitely a difficult one. What I can tell you is that in our current research, we run into a lot of issues where different legal frameworks internationally clash, right? So on a kind of low scale, this can pertain to different classifications of criminal offenses in different EU member countries, where this then creates a lot of friction in the Schengen information system, for instance, where according to the legal framework of member state A, something is a criminal offense. According to the legal framework of member state B, this is not a criminal offense. Then how do you deal with an alert in the Schengen information system when you encounter the person that has been put into the system by member state A, and then local authorities in member state B take that person into custody, but there is no actual legal ground for doing so in their country. And if you think this further, and we've actually spoken to people from Interpol about this, there is a lot of trouble regarding that exact question, that exact question that you just posed. Like, how can you assess the credibility or the objectivity of a criminal record that has been issued by a third country? I can't give you a straight answer. I don't know how to possibly do that. I think you said it yourself that a lot of that probably needs to be done on a case-by-case basis, where you really look into particular case files and then decide whether there is a credibility or a trustworthiness of that criminal record. Look into who has been issuing the arrest warrant, how was the case court, the criminal court, how was it constituted, how was the proceeding. I don't think there's a one catch or one size fits all procedure that you can apply here. But yeah, I think it's super difficult probably. Sorry, I can't give you a better answer here, but I mean, I do acknowledge the problem. I just don't see an easy solution.
All right. Thank you very much. I see one hand up from the audience in Zoom. That's Isabel. If you want to pose your question, but please quickly, because we are running out of time and we have this afternoon session. So the floor is yours.
I promise I'll do really quickly, and it's not a question, just to add to this debate that we have in Brazil. I'm from Brazil, a very different process for asylum seekers, and we are facing right now a huge influx of asylum seekers and migrants from Venezuela. And this debate of the criminal records and all that doesn't even show up. We have a different position as other countries in the case of security concerns, and that we know there is a lot of political persecution happening in Venezuela. This is not something that even shows up in the debate of the influx that we have. For example, we had in 2019 21,000 asylum seekers who were granted the refugee status at once by our regulatory government. Oh, I forgot the word, but 20,000 people were granted at once, at the same time, the refugee status. So we have different experiences according to each country security concerns. So that's just wanted to state that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Isabel. Matthias, would you like to react or say something? I mean, if you want, as you wish.
Yeah, I think it's a great comment, and I mean, like I said in the beginning, I've just predominantly done research on the European Union, which is a kind of a complicated case enough because it is a multi-level governance system. But if you look into other parts of the world, then we're probably going to find very different regulatory systems that come with their own challenges and own problems in terms of how data are being used and mobilized for the regulation of security and mobility issues. So I think in that sense, it's a great comment that really tells us that what we are looking here at, from our Western or global North perspective is really not the only thing in the world, right? I mean, there's so much else going on. But yeah, maybe as a final word, I mean, super sorry for going over time. I know you guys are hungry and you want to have a break, but just thanks for having me. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with you, and I wish you a great summer school and have a good day. And I mean, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthias, for your very interesting presentation and this journey into data quality issues and EU border procedures. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear? No. Okay, sí, yeah. Sí.